Welcome, boys and girls. Welcome back to the live stream. This one is going to be quite a treat. I have, for your viewing pleasure and our interviewing enjoyment, one GPU hoarder, Mr. David Stanfill.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. David, how are you?
Doing well.
Nice. Let me go ahead and just turn that music off because it's awesome once and then the magic wears off. It's like Genie in the bottle. Can't put it back in.
Only so many repeats.
Right. So, David, thanks for being on the show. You know what? I think I see an issue right now with my card. Hey, guys, I don't think you can see our video. I can see David. He can see me, but I don't think you guys can see us. Is that about right? All right. Let's go ahead and just fix that real fast because I think what we've got is boom. Haha. Okay, we should be live now.
I'll take your word for it.
I know, right? It's like magic, right? Any technology that is sufficiently complicated. Live stream isn't that complicated, actually. It's mostly just button pushing. But here we are. David, thanks for making some time to be on the show. We've got tons of people turning out in the interview section right now, or in the comment section, which is going to kind of turn into the impromptu interview section because of everyone's burning questions.
I know. We've seen just the streams and streams of questions coming in, and of course, we're trying to build a lot of hardware and finalize a bunch of software and get some pieces done. But I've tried to be pretty active in there because we want to make sure everybody has all of the information.
Nice. Well, appreciate you taking the time out to do this. Guys, we have a couple new additions to the live stream itself. I'm kind of messing around with Streamlabs OBS. So if you do stuff, if you chat, if you ask questions, you're going to notice that we have our Discord comments here, and then we have our YouTube comments right over there, kind of front and center. So we're going to be getting comments that are baked into our live stream real time. So your comments will live on forever. It's a really good thing that we don't have like a chalkboard here for people to draw pictures. But
you know, we work in education a lot, and we deal with screen sharing to the front of the room in the classrooms. And you wouldn't believe all of the things that kids try to put up there. So,
naughty. Well, all right, guys, be on your best behavior because David is here out of the goodness of his heart. David, before we get started, typically I'd save this question till the very end, but can I just for the record, did I provide you with any list of questions that I was going to ask you in our live stream?
I wish you did, but no.
All right. Well, hey, here's the thing. I'm an equal opportunity grill master, so nobody got that benefit. Zencash didn't. Bitcoin Private didn't. Bitcoin Gold didn't. They all came on out of the goodness of their hearts. Some of them live streamed, and they rolled with the punches. So I really appreciate you being willing to do that in regards to hardware development and answering the questions, because I know this is a lot more community driven. This one, people just want to know, right? Miners have a need to know what's coming down the pipeline to adjust, pivot, and plan appropriately. So this is awesome that you're doing this.
This is a very dynamic world. And I said from the get-go when you asked me about doing a live stream versus a pre-recorded, and I said, let's do the live stream. I'm perfectly happy to be candid on camera with you and with everybody out there on what we're doing and what it's all about.
Nice. I appreciate that. Hey guys, I just want to quickly shout out JMS Vlogs in the house. We've also got Christy Lee Minahan, aka Got a Girl, also in the audience. We've got Alien. We've got Thomas, T-Bone in the audience as well. Joe St. Louis, and really quickly call out Kevin Mamuskia, our latest moderator. He was first to comment. Little did he know that he was actually volunteering to become a moderator. That's what that means on this channel. Sharing is caring, guys. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to continue to get more viewers in. Wow, this is growing absolutely like wildfire. So without...
You can't see the viewer count. That's
right. Don't look at the comments either. I'll cherry pick those. And we got some folks who are actually doing some moderation. So that's going to help a lot. So why don't we start from the very beginning? David, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do day to day? You do development. Clearly, you work in education a bit as well. What's your background?
So I'm at core a low-level developer. If it touches hardware, if it interacts at the firmware level, if it's OS level, Wi-Fi drivers, things like that, that's where I work at in core. So the company that I have here, it's actually been around for about 10 years under 2 different names, is called Squirrels. Squirrels works in education, as you mentioned. We do a lot with screen sharing. So AirPlay, Chromecast, Miracast, things that are going from the teacher's iPad or Chromebook up to the front of the room, or student devices up to the front of the room in classrooms. That's a big part of our market. The other part of our market is in the presentation space. So you have conference rooms, boardrooms, same kind of scenario. We've got wireless screen sharing going back and forth. We've got some high security things with a lot of different encryption protocols, key agreement. Prior to that, I did some background in industrial control and electronic processing on the credit card side. So security and encryption is something I've dealt with around for a while.
Awesome. I'm curious about what years were you into credit card encryption and security?
Just about the time that PCI DSS was going through. Everybody was switching out just before chip and pin, but a lot of the security requirements were going up. So that would have been but between 8 and 10 years ago at this point when I was first started in activity in that space.
Nice. I only asked because I did a short stint as the national trainer for ISIS Mobile Wallet on behalf of AT&T. So had to pitch at the shareholders meeting there. They thought rotating CVV codes were like the business. and NFC for sure. We'd all be making payments with NFC, but awesome. So it sounds like you got a broad range of experience, but clearly you're a deep expert in low level hardware.
I wouldn't say an expert, but it's an intense area of focus.
Don't be modest. Everybody's here to listen to you talk about that particular topic. So even if you're only one chapter ahead of all of us, you can fool them. So
I'm not really worried about fooling anybody, but yeah, at heart, I'm a generalist. I like to make sure that I know how every piece of the stack works, because how are you going to make the best decisions, make the best design decisions if you're dealing with throwing things over walls and not understanding end to end? But when it comes to other people in my company who have dealt with me being very focused on these projects over the last all of 2018 at the very least, they understand that this is my focus and that the deep hardware side is really an area of passion and interest for me.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear that, because I know a lot of folks are, we want to know that anybody who's involved in this space and who's leading out in blockchain and specifically in mining, right, securing the networks, that you are like all in, even if it's only in a weekends, evenings kind of way, that you're all in with the interest.
This is definitely not evenings and weekends. So
awesome.
I have a great team. We've got a whole core business that team is running with. I've got a great team that's specific to. So actually, we have a team, and it's kind of on the shirt there, is the SQRL, which is our Squirrels Research Labs. And this has kind of existed in Skunkworks for probably since about 2015. But we have a team that's dedicated to those up-and-coming projects and initiatives that maybe even don't have a clear to market and aren't necessarily commercial projects, but are things we're passionate about or things we want to learn about. So there's a whole great team taking care of the education side, the screen sharing space, but this isn't a nights and weekends thing. We're fully focused in this.
Awesome. That's what I love to hear. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about the team then. You've mentioned that you have a team that is supporting your efforts right now with Squirrel Research and with this whole foray into FPGAs and FPGA mining. What we chatted about briefly on Discord to give some transparency here without like asking or answering questions, you mentioned and you made the comment, I think you'll find that this resurgence of interest in FPGA mining is not like it was with Bitcoin and Litecoin earlier on with FPGAs. Because I think those are the two primary targets with FPGAs early on in mining. So
they were the targets for everything at that point, right?
Yeah, well, there wasn't much else, right? There was first, and then there was Charlie Lee was first to be second, I guess. So yeah. But outside of that, the additional coin clones that ran off of those proof of work algorithms, it seems like FPGAs just got leapfrogged by GPUs at the time that you might have tried to mine any altcoins with them anyway. But what did you mean by a resurgence of interest now at FPGAs? And there was a bit of foreshadowing in that statement.
Well, you have to look at the FPGA market. It's a whole continuum, right? It's just like the ASIC chip market in some ways. You have ASIC chips that are extremely cheap and little. And by the way, that's exactly what Bitmain's miners and the ASIC miners are built off of, right? They put hundreds of very, very cheap chips into a box. And the FPGAs that were used early in Bitcoin, Litecoin mining, most of those were very small. They were the LX150 device that was very, very popular. It was a bunch of Spartan 6 chips. So those are small, inexpensive, cheap FPGAs. And the very, very high-end FPGAs at the time, the Vertex line from Xilinx and the high-end Stratix line, they're extremely expensive. And that's remained true for a while. But this thing happens in silicon, right? Everyone, Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, they've all been pushing the silicon side down. We've got Moore's Law, we've got all those things. So now everybody's at 14, 16. Some people are talking about 10, 7 coming up here soon. Those numbers are much smaller jumps, right? We're not talking micrometers. We're not talking 45 to 28. That's a big jump.
Right. Right. What's funny because Rick Kurzweil in his book, he talked about 100 nanometer being the threshold for when we could start seeing technologies that be disruptive to the level that could cause a singularity style event. And I remember listening to that on audiobook in Austin, just driving to and from work, like, bruh, we're already at 28 nanometer. So,
yeah, we're in danger right now.
Right. But I don't feel like my consciousness is being siphoned off into a complex AI somewhere.
Well, that's the key. You're not supposed to feel it, right? It's just happening.
Right. Awesome. So to your point, the fabrication sizes, right, or lithography is getting smaller and smaller.
Well, there's a convergence there. And so FPGAs are fundamentally built on a very similar process with a fundamentally different layer there in terms of the flexibility. ASICs are completely inflexible or maybe have certain amounts of programmability to them. FPGAs are basically a blank slate. I equate it when I'm describing it to some of our less technical team. A GPU reads a list of instructions and follows those instructions exactly as written. An FPGA is like a very well-trained staff member. You can train them exactly on what to do once, and then they're just doing it from memory. They don't need the list of instructions. Whereas an ASIC, the guy knows exactly how to do one thing. Don't ever ask him to do anything else.
Right. He's like Bender from Futurama. Yep. Only I don't think that ASICs technically drink alcohol to function, but, bad example.
There are a lot of interesting cooling techniques being explored, so it might be out there.
Yeah, right. But it just
alcohol evaporation cooling.
Yeah, Novak isn't alcohol-based.
No, I don't think so.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so jokes aside, if you watch my interviews, you know that I like to keep things very topical and breezy, and it gives us an opportunity to pivot.
We're going to have a problem that I'm very much on tangent.
Oh, no.
No, it's fun.
Awesome. Okay, so
go ahead.
So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about dies shrinking, right? Transistor counts growing, and this being an increasing problem. Let's boil it down to a high-level statement that pretend like everybody here, right? I'm not going to tell you the viewer count, but it's doubled since I last referenced it. And let's just pretend like everybody here is part of a VC panel, and you're pitching for development dollars. What's the high-level problem? If you could boil it down to one thing.
So it's that convergence. FPGAs, ASICs are now running up to walls that are letting FPGAs catch up in the performance and cost arena. That's what I'm getting at with the shrink digit dies. And you've also got company interest coming in here, right? You've got the FPGA companies who are used to selling very, very expensive chips, frankly, at very, very high margins. I don't think they'd like if I said it, but it's true.
Well, anything that goes to retail, though, has to maintain enough margin to not only cover development, but make sure that the company is profitable. It's, I mentioned it a lot on the show. Y Combinator, right? Mark Andreessen, don't die. You just can't die. Otherwise, you don't get to develop another day. Exactly.
But on the FPGA side, it's not exactly been dying, right? Their primary markets are Department of Defense, big things like that. Golden toilet seat type.
Sure. Yeah. $300 hammer.
And there's reasons for that. It's not just massive margins for the sake of margins. Those markets also they can't take a single error upset. They can't. One bit flipping can cause a power plant to go into shutdown or something crazy to happen. And of course, you have redundant systems. You have other checks, but so there's two pieces to that. One, that you pay a price for that tolerance, that level of no errors, no upsets. The other piece of that is you take a performance hit. You run these things much lower margins than you potentially can, sometimes as much as half the speed. If you look at data sheets and specs, you're running at much as half the speed in the data sheet of what the silicon's actually capable of.
Sure,
so
mil spec has a connotation for sure, but it also does have that. But it also is a real thing in terms of reliability.
Real reasons for doing it.
Yeah, cool.
So that's a lot of the feedback I'll get is they did the math, right? Oh, I looked at the data sheet and it said this much memory can run at this speed. So everything you are saying is false.
Right. Again, mil spec means something when having to deal with the human component too.
Yes, right. So the reality is those data sheets are targeted at markets that can't take a single upset, and the amount of overhead on those is actually fairly intensive.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, all right. So it sounds like then the FPGA markets, primary customers, like you mentioned, you got the DoD contracts in place, which we know it's not exactly a gravy train, but these are desirable contracts to have in place.
Yep. And that's not all of their market, but that's a piece. And that type of customer, it's the same type of customer. I mean, if you're looking at other places FPGAs go in place, which is backbone internet infrastructure, things that are not particularly happy to take a bunch of errors and a bunch of faults, and they're about reliability. So boil it down to a statement: FPGA primary market is about 100% reliability, and that is in the DNA of these companies from the ground up. To build, to market, to spec, to design, to put down best practices around that reliability, not around absolute cutting edge, bleeding edge performance, which is the world we like to play in.
Oh yeah, well, our cutting edge, bleeding edge. Are you kidding? We love to redline till the wheels fall off. It goes.
That's what I absolutely love about crypto. At the core of it, I am a hardware geek, and I've spent years pushing the envelope on that, where I can find the fastest possible thing. And I've spent years being very disappointed, right? Around 2015, we built, as part of the research team here, a 128 GPU liquid cooled cluster, all Fury X's. So much heat. Heats are building in the winter, actually.
Nice.
We built that with various Xeons and X99 chips at the time of this all 2011 V3 stuff. And we were looking for the fastest chips we could buy. We bought and experimented with early Knights Landing stuff, massive core count, 512 virtual cores, Knights Landing, Xeon Phi accelerators, all of those things. We looked at them, we built them, pushed them, and I was continually disappointed because a new chip would come out, it would get announced, a new piece of hardware would come out, it would get announced. I would get it, I would be all excited about the spec sheet. I'd put the code to the metal and put the programming to the metal on it, and it would be incrementally faster.
Okay, so this is a pain point for you. This is kind of where this is kind of the I mentioned it before. One of the pain points of doing interviews surrounding crypto is you can't say the genesis of an idea because people are like, that wasn't the genesis block. It's like,
yes,
it's still common parlance, but yeah. And I can't say the seed for the idea. No, it's not a seed phrase. So the original pain point that you had was surrounding this build. It sounds like this was one of the pain points that got you thinking like, okay, moving towards higher performance.
Yeah. How are we going to complete crypto side, market side? How are we going to push the envelope? How do we actually get faster and not a marketing team shows some faster numbers? And anyone who's been deep in performance space, even gaming, PC tuning, everything like that, knows that. They've watched the graphs go from here to here to here, and not here to here.
Right. Regardless, well, AMD they've had phenomenal marketing. I mean, do you remember, what was their earliest Fusion promise? We were supposed to have heterogeneous silicon with the CPUs and GPU cores like over 10 years ago.
I'm all about heterogeneous, the word that I can't manage to ever say. I'm all about that style of compute. I'm just going to call it mixed compute, keep it simple. I'm all about mixed compute, and you'll see that with everything we're talking about with the Acorn.
Nice.
For different jobs.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, even ARM, right? ARM went to the big little design, right? Because of that unique strengths that sometimes can only be expressed in hardware.
Yep.
So cool. It sounds like then. Oh, hold on a second. Did we just get a bunch, guys? What actual questions do you have so far? Let me just make sure. Oh yeah, Trollolino is asking the central through line, which is the central question that the title of this video. GPU hoarder, why you gotta hoard GPUs?
I think it might just stem from general hoarder tendencies and it evolved into GPU hoarding, but as I said, we were using GPUs before the resurgence of GPU mining in 2015. And so people started trying to take my GPUs, so I had to hoard them.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'd be curious to know, maybe it's not appropriate for a mixed company. I'd be curious to know what kinds of social lines you had to draw in the sand to ensure that your stuff didn't get borrowed.
We've just kept a lot of GPUs here active for our team, and not just in crypto, but we do have a lot of GPUs active in crypto. I'm very pro GPU, very aligned with GPUs on this. But I also have a handful of GPUs that are just devoted to things that I'm passionate about, research side, things in the number theory space. Actually, in our super GPU cluster and our collection of hoarded GPUs, one of the things those have gotten used for is the last two known largest prime numbers, and they're same primes through the GIMPS project. We did the verification of the find for both of those using some of our GPUs that were part of this cluster.
Nice. Nice. I think that's meant to be part of, well, that was part of the scope of work for Richard Hart's CFD token was validating new prime numbers. I want to have Richard on the show sometime. I don't think he's going to return a call about CFD token because I don't know where it is right now, but that's awesome. So they're talking about it. You're doing it with GPUs. Bravo. Let's get back around to about 2017, right? Where things start to get hot. 2015, of course, like you mentioned, mining resurgence. There are some people who are interested in mining Ethereum, right? No, not quite at this point. About 2015, right? Everyone's starting to mine Ethereum on GPU, right? So, or Ether rather, on GPU. So you're noticing that characters want to get their hands on your GPUs. You start to hoard. And at what point did you start thinking, maybe I have to start including FPGA into mining again?
It's actually been on the topic, I think about 2016, right? It started when we were working on the number theory research side, right? The Mersenne prime searches, some very fast FFT Fourier transforms, and some crazy trial division algorithms on the GPU side, optimizing those. And we said, that community said, okay, well, if we had FPGAs, these unobtainable tens of thousands of dollar FPGAs, we could do amazing things. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what amazing things? Tell me more. And that was when I really, this is still 2015, 2016, when I really started looking into FPGA capabilities on the accelerate side. So if you accelerate into the beginning of 2017, that's when we turned more and more of our GPU clusters towards mining for natural reasons. Here, we like to expand our GPU collection, not keep it small. So we moved our GPUs toward mining, and then I started looking into the FPGA applications of that. So just in this last fall, 2017, is when I really got time to take a deep dive on this. And I basically pulled out every dev board, every angle from Altera, now Intel, Xilinx, all of those different FPGA boards, and started to really look at where the capabilities were. And I looked at those existing miner boards and found out exactly what I was talking about before. These are bottom barrel, cheapest chips you can get. Nobody put a business plan around sure people put business plans around building those, but nobody worked to really drive that cost into an appreciable market, and nobody really worked to get access to the real silicon. So FPGA's got this rap as not being fast enough, not being good enough, not being flexible enough, not having the memory. And it was really unfair to FPGAs.
Yeah. Yeah, weird. Okay, so fast forward through 2017. And now here we are. Bull run happens, right? Everyone is interested in mining all of a sudden because
luckily we started before that.
Right. So you've first off you done hoarded your GPUs, and which is good, and because clearly the market just went nuts, right? AMD and Nvidia, they're like, good grief, they're like the new mining world.
Started.
Yeah, right. They're like ExxonMobil, right? They're writing their own ticket now, and margins I'm sure are higher than they've ever been. Profits are higher than they've ever been. Sales higher than they've ever been. They're killing it, right? So end of 2017, you see the bull run, and it's obvious that everybody else has figured out that this might be something they're interested in. At what point did you think, okay, this work we've been doing on FPGAs we need to go public with this. We need to start thinking about creating some kind of maybe consumer product, maybe just kind of a niche product for miners, maybe mid-level miners, maybe entry-level miners?
So about January of this year is when I really looked at what I had and said, okay, I have something here. We need to actually take time on it. That's really where I told my business partners, hey, I've got to pull some time away because I need to focus on this.
Okay, awesome. So relatively recent, but clearly you already had quite a bit of foundation done, right, built.
Yeah, and it's all that foundational part that really makes the difference here. And that's why this business space, I shouldn't call it a business per se, but this space, crypto, and everything that's happening here, which I'm very, very active in from the algorithm side all the way through the hardware side. It's full of scams, and it's full of people who think that they're going to do something real quick and get rich, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to get rich here. Life's been good to me. I'm fine. I'm trying to do awesome stuff. So maybe that was an overshare, but we'll leave it at that. So,
well, further, I should say that I don't think that your motivations are all that dissimilar from a lot of the open source community that's come onto the channel. It sounds like you're approaching this from an engineering standpoint. You just want to solve cool problems.
Yeah, I want to solve really cool problems. I want to take hardware and I want to bring that hardware into crypto and then beyond crypto too, with what can be enabled once all of this hardware is out there. So the coolest thing that's happened in crypto has been between 2017, 2018, this massive interest from broad in the community. And this finally a massive interest in high performance. It's a little bit different, right? We're not filling data centers per se that are nice and clean. We're filling sheds with sawdust flowing through the GPUs and everything else. But at the end of the day, people are interested in performance. They're tweaking memory times. They're finding every way to eke every last bit of performance out of that. And that gets me excited. But I do care about exactly what's happening in this space from an actual crypto level. I love what we're doing in crypto. I love the entire point of crypto. I love the decentralized nature of it. I hate dealing with the bank side of it. And I love the general egalitarian, call it decentralized nature of it. I deal with enough things that are not that way that it's really attractive. So I want to support it every way that I can is where it really comes down to.
Awesome. So I'm just here's a bit of a curveball, and it hasn't been asked yet, but the question must be, it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Have there been any regulatory bodies or government organizations who've reached out to you with any kind of concern based on this direction of FPGA development?
So we are working extremely closely with Xilinx on this project. And they're very, very aware of the regulatory situation around their products. The cool thing is that on my team, in my extended team, I have some people that are who have worked in that DoD capacity, who have dealt with ITAR, dealt with import-export, dealt with all those certifications. So we're very aware of exactly what that landscape looks like. So to bluntly answer the question, no. We haven't had anybody from a regulatory capacity come out and ask us, what are you doing? Are you going to ship chips over here to Iran that are going to build nuclear weapons?
Right. Christy and I had a laugh about, and I'm sure you remember because you were working so close to the space, PS3, right? And was it 2006, 2005, 2006? 2006, 2007, I think. Yeah, with PS3, that it was deemed a security risk because of the cell processor. Yep. Yeah, right. Was that at 7?
Specifications there in ITAR are really interesting because it is a relatively low threshold. I can't remember if it's 600 or 800 gigaflops or something. It's a really low number that if you exceed, you have to fall under certain classifications.
Wow.
But just like any landscape, it's all about navigating that landscape and respecting not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of it. That saves you a lot of grief.
Right. Crazy. So sounds like so far, thank goodness, not a big problem there. You know what I'm missing, guys? I apologize. Let me just quickly shout out to Mining Harder. Thanks so much. Appreciate the tip to the channel. All of that goes towards providing value added content. As you know, these are we try to keep these reviews unbiased. And again, for the record, You didn't offer payment for this interview. I didn't give you questions, but you didn't offer payment either. So I didn't know you any questions.
No, in fact, I don't think that I have told you anything to ask.
Awesome. So just quick shout out there, guys. You're the reason that these things exist. Community, right? We need a little more light shed on the process in terms of securing the blockchain, in terms of understanding where new coins are coming from, new crypto projects specifically, and then securing blockchain as miners and as contributors to this large community. We need a little more transparency. We need a little more open discourse. Not everything can be a public conversation all the time, but some things maybe can and should. So,
and I tend to lean towards the public conversations more than a lot of people would like, but that's exactly my view on this space in general, and just in everything I do, is that transparency is very, very important. Everybody should understand, and we said this, so we're dealing with the BCU 1525 right now, right? Lots of discussion around that. And in taking that project on, which of course wasn't part of our original roadmap, that project came on because we saw Whitefire 990, who's a great guy, had lots of conversations with one-on-one. We've nerded out about all kinds of engineering stuff. But I don't know if I agree with the way that he just dropped all of this information out on the Bitcoin Talk forum, didn't really take responsibility for what it was going to cause. In terms of, there's a lot of FOMO here, right? So immediately what was going to happen is everyone and their brother and their sister and everyone they know was going to say, FPGAs are great. And they have no idea how broad, you think the difference between a 550 and a 580 is big. This landscape of FPGAs is 10 times larger from the top line chip to the bottom line chip.
Awesome. Should we get some visuals going over here? Do you want me to pull up a browser and maybe throw out a model number that we can get a concrete visual and example from?
Maybe. I don't know what you'll pull up real fast, but if you look at a Spartan 6 chip and you look at the specifications of it, I think that was 45 nanometer, and forget exactly the price those boards were going for, but let's say right now you could probably get that chip for less than $100. It's going to run slow. I think maybe 150 megahertz might even be a high ask for some of the crypto algorithms. I got to caveat that with I have not done a ton of work directly on the Spartan 6. I got into this on much better hardware. But look at that. That's a chip on the lower end of the scale. So 45 nanometer was released originally years ago. And this is what people were mining on originally. And there were people profitably mining on Spartan 6s probably a year and a half ago. There might have been people profitably mining on them right up until Whitefire released all the information. And that's a big thing that I want everybody to be aware of in this space is FPGA mining didn't die. It went into secret, hiding, because the field of people who knew how to deal with these and knew how to use them was small. I'm not a fan of that, and I'm really trying to blow the lid off of that and take away that advantage on those little private, secret operations. But make no doubt, there are thousands of FPGAs out there right now. And I think that's a little bit of what, when the post went up on the DIY FPGAs on Bitcoin Talk, I don't know if anybody realized, independent of the potential ASIC ramp-ups, there are thousands of FPGAs that started looking at those algorithms, and those difficulties have risen significantly since then, before Whitefire's even had time to get his algorithms out. So we have to be careful in what goes into this space and making sure that it actually protects the blockchains and protects the ecosystems and protects the coins, and doesn't just create imagine if Bitcoin had just sold 10,000 of their ASIC miners to a private organization that had no idea that they could be used on a certain coin. And then all of a sudden somebody told them they could be used on a new coin. That's a huge amount of latent hardware that all of a sudden just enters the market.
Yeah.
And that can be really damaging.
Yeah. Wow. Nuts. So it looks like then, this broad range. Let me just quickly hide some stuff out of the way there, guys.
Go from a Spartan 6 and then go up to, let's see, what's a Spartan 6 150? That probably means 150 logic elements. So what, 70,000 LUTs, which LUTs are they're lookup tables. They're kind of the fundamental building block of FPGA logic.
Okay, awesome. See, I'm coming from a video production and filmmaking standpoint. So when you mentioned LUTs to somebody who does filmmaking, think of 3D lookup tables, which are just totally different. It's a color profile essentially for how color is expressed in a given pixel. But wow. Okay, so awesome. Yeah. Sorry for that. Yeah, we've got a couple people who will tune in and be like, "What a LUT? I'm confused." So same acronym, lookup tables. How are these applied in FPGA programming?
So the way FPGAs work is an ASIC is a whole bunch of transistors wired together exactly how you want them to be. Anyone that's done a little bit of work around computers and understands that they're built on logic knows that those transistors make up gates, AND gates, NOR gates, NOT gates, Boolean logic gates. On the FPGA level, all of those transistors are there without fixed connections between them. And they're grouped together into little units called LUTs, basically. And if you put a couple gates together, you can have a certain number of inputs, let's say 4 inputs, and then you have a truth table that says for each of those 4 binary inputs, each one 0, 1, for every combination of those inputs, which is 2 to the 4th, I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 16 different combinations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But for every one of the 16 possible combinations, you either want the output to be 1 or 0. That's a 4-input LUT at the very basic level without over exaggerating the explanation here. And you can build that truth table of how those combinations should work to emulate a large number of gate combinations that would be on a traditional ASIC. And that truth table is just in SRAM. It's in very, very fast RAM that when you program a bit stream, all you're doing is configuring millions of those LUT blocks, the SRAM bits in those LUT blocks to program those truth tables, as well as to program all the interconnections between the LUT blocks. And what that allows you to do is basically build an ASIC that you can change the wiring of.
Okay.
You still got gates and transistors in a big base. Sea of gates is another thing that people will say for FPGAs. But when you program the bit stream, you've just connected all of the wires between them however you want for that exact circuit. So it's not processing instructions. It's not running through code or opcodes. It's hardwired just like an ASIC with one small layer of abstraction. But the amount of logic, just like the area of an ASIC die, you'll hear that talked about a lot. AMD will come out and just show how big their giant chunk of silicon is on their latest TPU to talk about how much functionality you can fit in it. The area of an ASIC is very similar to the number of LUTs in an FPGA. So back on topic of the spectrum, a Spartan 6 is sitting there with 150,000 logic elements, which is more equivalent to gates in ASICs than LUTs, but 150,000 logic elements. A Vertex is over 2 million, right? So you have a factor of 10 to 15x more power in a Vertex Ultra Scale than a Spartan 6, just in terms of area. And then you've also gone from 45 nanometer tech to 16 nanometer tech. And people in the technical side of the space understand how much difference that's caused just in the CPU and GPU space. So that's why it's really night and day when you're having these people talking about, can I still use FPGAs? No, they're weak, they can't compete. Well, yeah, if you're talking about an FPGA.
I gotta call it out. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the JMS love from Ric Flair. So that just we just sent that out live. Apologies for the interruption. Got some folks who are, it's the thing about live streaming is that everyone's got a comment, everyone's got a question, and occasionally people throw you some spare change. It's kind of cool. Thank you so much, guys. So awesome. So we're talking about the sort of the drawing comparisons between how you might envision the processing power of an ASIC versus how you actually achieve an actual processing environment, hardware environment on an FPGA. And so trying to make sure that I'm picking up what you're throwing down, because I'm not a programmer, but I play one on YouTube. So I think this is making sense. An FPGA, for all intents and purposes, there's a very thin layer of abstraction that gives it ASIC-like performance as soon as you've been able to do this level of programming.
Yeah, which is basically loading the bit stream.
Okay, cool. Yeah, high level makes sense to me. So let's talk a little bit about kind of some audience questions that we have right now. And again, not to intimidate, but now that the audience is about triple the first time that I initially mentioned that, I feel like we should probably start including them in this conversation. All right. Hey, Michael, thank you, and welcome to the channel. So got a couple of questions about, well, Voltron asks a very specific question, and this is a high-level question. I don't necessarily expect a yes or no. Let's dive into this a little bit, because I think this merits a bit more explanation. Is GPU mining dead? Does FPGA mining pose that big a threat today?
No. If you're viewing this as GPU mining is dead, you might as well say GPU mining is dead, or AMD mining is dead every time NVIDIA releases a new GPU, and NVIDIA mining is dead every time AMD does.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And yeah, I think with Intel and AMD and the CPU side, they keep. I mean, it sells clicks. They don't sell newspapers anymore. It sells clicks, right, to have sensational comments like that. But it seems like from where I'm sitting, I don't have an FPGA in my studio or in the warehouse. You had to. Oh gosh darn it! You had to. Oh. Okay, everyone. Hit that like button. Maybe David will bring that back out in a minute so we can take a closer look. But you have to give him some enticement. Okay, you gotta give him some incentive there. So from where I'm sitting right now, I don't have an FPGA in the studio. I don't have an FPGA over at the warehouse. None of the miners, mid-scale or large-scale miners that I know in the state of Utah currently are openly admitting to using FPGAs. And so I don't have a whole lot of experience with it.
You're openly admitting to.
But yeah, right. That said, like on the show and on the channel, I've been admonishing viewers who may have financial means to get their hands on some FPGAs and start poking around bitstream development. It just makes sense, right, to sort of be prepared for any kind of a wave of technology that could affect mining. But let's talk about the prospects of how FPGAs can complement GPU mining today, and what the prospects are over the next, I'd say 18 months. It's always hard to look that far in advance, but let's just say 18 months.
Yeah. Let me get out my crystal ball, and I'll tell you exactly when to sell all your ETH.
Right. Well, that's why we had you on the show, David. Thank you so much. Whew. I was worried you wouldn't deliver. Okay, crystal ball out. Let's do this.
Okay, so on the FPGA side, what you're looking at right now, with this is, and keep in mind this is the active version, which is a little bit different than what's shipping out, but we can talk about that more in depth later. This is This is actually a VCU 1525, or a hybrid, because it's not exactly the VCU 1525 that Xilinx sells. It has some modifications we requested on it ahead of the VCU, but we're selling them out with the DIMM memory right now, $3,600, and it's performance-wise is capable of delivering about 10x performance on most of the algorithms that are going to be covered. So if you compare that to a $360 RX 580 from market, that's maybe not a current market price, but it's about 10x the cost, 10x the benefit.
I'm gonna pull up some visuals while you do that. Let's just, what the heck, guys, for argument's sake, because we want to kind of polish that crystal ball clean. Go on, about 10x the performance of, say, the average RX 580 that most miners are mining on today.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna look at that price though.
Yeah, so that price, at least recently, was around $360. I'm sure it's dropped a little bit since then. When I bought my 580s, they were close to $200, but I look, you can get one for $499 if you really want some out of stock in it.
Right. Yeah, let's see it. So we'll just pull this open in the background, guys, and hopefully this is.
The market's a lot better right now, right?
It seems like it's improving a little bit. We'll have to see exactly what that means. But here we go, center that up a little bit, easier to see for anybody that's checking in there. But
yep, that's the range you would expect, right? High 280s, up to $300. It looks like SuperBiz is not doing SuperBiz right there with $349.
Right. But you're below the $300 threshold, which is great for the RxCs. Right. I mean, they debuted at $250 MSRP for the 8 gig 580, I think.
Yep.
So it's great that we're back close. That's pathetic. Cards that are over a year old, we're happy to have them almost back down to MSRP.
Yeah, this market's been crazy. And that's the other part of FPGAs. And I got to be clear, I've been using the 10x multiplier number because it's safe. There's a lot of development happening here in the FPGA space. And it's not that anyone wants to keep secret numbers from anyone. It's frankly that I put a huge amount of importance on delivering the right numbers and meeting the expectations that we lay out there. So that prevents me from saying those numbers are really low. You should really dig into the Discords and the chats and the talk threads to get at some real numbers. So I can't say that, but we'll stick with the 10x number. So with that said, there are other big tangential benefits too, right? So that's upfront capital costs, which a lot of miners and a lot of people that are mining various coins, that's what they see. They see, okay, I can get this much hash for this much dollars. Either they have free or cheap electricity, or they never check their electric bills, because the operating cost of these things is the other huge difference. So if you're really, really diligent and let's say you're really great and you get your RX 580 sipping power around 100, 120 watts. I know people can go lower, people can go higher, but let's say that those are the numbers, 100, 120 watts. So to get the same 10x performance on this thing, you are going to typically be in the range of 150 to 250 watts. There are extreme cases where you're doing nothing but compute, you're not touching the memory at all, where that number's way higher, and you're pulling 350 watts. Ketchik, which is Whitefire's test stream, can easily pull up to 350 watts out of this card. But either way, that's not 10x power. That's not 1200 watts. So the operating costs and the hosting costs and the single slot, or if you really don't even want to use slots and you want to run off USB, really don't recommend it, unless you want to reconfigure all your rigs here in a few months. It's a drastically different equation. So this goes back to your question. Is this going to kill GPU mining? Is this going to kill GPU mining? No. It's a great piece. I would say if you were looking at numbers and GPUs were out there in 9-month ROIs, you're probably talking about 6-month ROIs.
That's what I'm talking about. These are the break even. These are the kind of financials that get business people excited, right? Because you're talking about being made whole on a deal in under a year. That's killer.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's a ratio, right? I'm not saying this is the 6-month ROI on some certain coin right now. I want to be very clear that I will deliver.
David, tell us what the secret coin is and the secret algo. That's why you're on the show.
Yes, Hoard coin. Yes, we'll pick one. But there are actually multiple coins out there that this is super beneficial for. But the key is that it's not an ASIC, right? That's actually very, very important. If the worst thing that can happen is the 5,000 of these that are coming out to market come out and get shipped and all start mining the same coin. That's worse. That's the worst thing for everyone out. It would be the same thing as dropping 50,000 GPUs on one coin like that. Which, by the way,
what is it, 18 plus million GPUs on one coin? Oh, wait.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's important that there's coverage here in the bit streams for all of the major coins that are out there, not just to protect the coins from the flood of hash rate. As I said, it's not night and day hash rates. Nobody should throw away all their GPUs. And some people who are diligent are going to be running their GPUs more efficiently than people who are not diligent set up their FPGAs. What it is more diversification into the space, more supply chains, and different coin opportunities for specialization.
Yeah, awesome. I need to mention, guys, on behalf of Matt from the Technicals, he's sorry that he couldn't be here on this live stream. He has a VCU 1525 that he ordered from another marketplace, and then he took delivery of fast because he wanted to get his hands on one, but is now, I don't want to say that he's not been diligent in trying to get it set up. I think it's just that he's been extremely diligent about other things, and nobody from his organization has been able to dedicate the time to do that. So what am I saying? Be like Matt, be a front runner, be a jet setter and get hardware. Don't be like Matt. Don't just let it sit there, because then you'll be talked about in the third person by David and me. So yeah, to your point, absolutely. A GTX 1050 Ti running 24/7, optimized, pointed at useful pools and actually returning shares is way better than anything else sitting on the shelf collecting dust, not powered on.
And your story right there is exactly what I was afraid of. And that's why we were even involved in the 1525 operation here, because exactly what was going to happen based on that information is everyone was going to go out and buy any FPGA they could find. the tiniest, cheapest, completely unsuitable for mining one, really big ones that are great for mining, but they don't realize that unlike a GPU, where every one of these GPUs are around me, there's a few of them.
Oh, guys, hit that like button for David. Look at that! Look at that stack of GPU boxes. We all aspire to being surrounded by the remnants of our consumer behavior here. It's the American dream. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's not exactly like those where somebody can write an OpenCL kernel or a CUDA implementation for a miner, and maybe it's not perfect on every card, but it's going to run. You're going to be able to get something on most modern cards. What's really important to understand about FPGAs is every single piece of hardware, every single unique board requires a unique bit stream.
Okay. This is a game changer for sure. What you're saying there, that'd be like saying that you have to unbox your brand new 1050 Ti, but not only will your 1050 Ti be require some, to use a very poor example actually, because they're being totally phased out of all modern proofs of work, like Equihash. The recent Equihash fork to 144.5 I think cuts out most 1050 Ti's, most 1030s, anything that's low cost, low power, I think is like out of luck. But it'd be like, unboxing whatever 1060 or an RX 580 and having to do absolutely being forced to do a VBIOS update before you could even start mining, and then further have to optimize do your algo tuning and have that reflect the VBIOS that you've installed. To use a kind of a poor example, does that sound almost right? Yep.
You basically have to download the miner that you wanted optimized exactly for and not just the 1050 Ti, but the Asus. I don't think Asus does that. Pick a vendor here. BNY 1050 Ti. So you would have to pick the specific board rev and then download the miner exactly for that. And that's why it was scary, because everyone's going to goes out and buys all these 10 different FPGAs and
let me just quickly shut this out. I apologize for the interruption. 7-year-old miner in the house, guys. We have a 7-year-old miner from Canada. That's Thomas's son is getting into mining, and he's actually understanding how to manage wallets and how to point mining software at pools and manage his wallets. So, guys, quick shout out there. Thanks so much, Thomas, for the tip, and tell your 7-year-old Clayton that he's awesome. And he's on the right live stream right now, learning the right stuff at the right time. So
I don't know many 27-year-olds that know how to manage their actual wallet, let alone their crypto wallet.
Yeah, right. What is it, like something like $1 billion in Bitcoin at least that's been lost, just the lost wallets?
Yeah, that's a sad story. I've been involved in some data recovery efforts to help some people, and I've got one underway right now. That's a very sad thing.
Yeah, so I apologize for the interruption, and I hope I haven't completely derailed you, but
not at all.
Yeah,
my
awesome.
concern, to get back on that concern real quick, is all these people buy all these different FPGAs off eBay or wherever else, or every vendor, and we see it right now in the Discord talk forum. People are saying, where can I get a bit stream for this board, this board, this board? And that's a very dangerous thing for the community, and it's a very dangerous thing for those people that are putting their money out there. So it was really, really important that we got a board design that can be standardized on to create at least a wide swath of bitstream coverage for all the coins that are out there, to make sure that these things aren't sitting on a shelf, and make sure even the one that he bought, the VCU 1525, which is compatible with these bitstreams, is not sitting on the shelf unable to be used because you don't know how to develop RTL and you don't know how to develop in Verilog or VHDL the algorithms for these. And that's a big high ask. Compare even the number of GPU compute developers who can do OpenCL kernels or low-level AMD development or CUDA development is an order of magnitude larger than the number of people who are currently equipped and even have the time to develop on the FPGA side of this.
Wow. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think I mentioned to Christy on our interview that I was at SIGGRAPH in 2008 when NVIDIA made their public announcement about CUDA, and as it related to visual arts and content creation. Then it was like, wow, cool, this is so awesome, this toolkit, who's going to develop on it? And everyone's like, I don't know. But it's been 10 years now, so to your point, you shake a tree, and and either an OpenCL or CUDA developer falls out. Thank goodness. But not like 5 though. It's not like it's not like Python or JavaScript, right? So
yeah. And that's not really to say this is important. It's not to say that it's that much harder or that there's such a smaller population that can possibly do it. It's just the market demand.
Yeah, awesome. So hey, miners, you heard it here first. You want good development? You got to pay. There's a secret, not really a secret. If you want really good developers, they earn 6 figures at other companies because they're offering 6 figures to do whatever they think is important. But we know that what we're doing is more important. We need to create some kind of a foundation or something for GPU and FPGA development, don't you think?
Funny you should mention that. One of the things that I've been working on is exactly that. It's really important to me that we are not the only source of bit streams, and we're not right now. There's a number of people active in the community that are working really hard to help make all the bit streams available for these FPGAs that are going out. But I want to make sure that the people who don't necessarily have the time or the tools, right? Because if you want to start developing for one of these, you need a $3,600 board, or the development edition of it. I think on Avnet is up to 8,000 or 9,000 now for the formal development edition. And you need a Vivado license, which you can get with that board, or if you bought individually, is as much as $5,000. You need a lot of time. It takes, depending on the computer you have, it can take 24 hours to compile, which is called synthesizing and then placing and routing one design. That's why most of the design and programming work for the FPGAs doesn't even happen on the hardware, and anybody can do it right now. You can download Vivado. You can jump in there into the parts that are open in the Webpack. You can write RTL. You can run it in the simulator. You can simulate your logic design. You can do all that for free, and that's how the first few months of any algorithm development actually.
Right. It's like
to do it.
Right. It's like those hard drugs. They get you with the first one free, but then you really got to pay once you need to commit.
Yeah. So to that point, I'm looking to set up a little bit of I'll call it a grant program on the RTL development side of this. So if you're out there and you've got RTL background and it's a day job and you can't just devote all your free time to it, but you want to participate in this community and you want to help out, my requirement is whatever you create is going out open to the community. But I'll help. I'll help get you hardware. I'll help get you licenses. I'll help cover your time.
Awesome. And will you be using any kind of a third-party crypto escrow service at all for that?
As far as a bounty style type approach?
Yeah, maybe. We'll call it a bounty style approach. But if you're creating a fund, will you be using any kind of third-party escrow?
That's something details need to be finalized on.
Cool. Well, the recommendation is out there. I'm a huge fan of community-driven support for crypto. My intent is, with all of this, supporting the mining side, supporting the open, non-paid interviews of coin founders and of lead development teams for different coin projects. I just want to see the entire coin market cap. We haven't broken $1 trillion yet. Yeah. We haven't even come that close yet, but we could. And
let me check my calendar. I think it's what is that, October 13th? No.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So my whole thing is I absolutely want to see that total coin market cap smash through $1 trillion. I want to see us. Everybody talks about when moon. Well, maybe we need to be talking about the entire crypto market cap.
About the entire crypto ecosystem, though, and I know that's very, very hard because everybody involved in this ecosystem has different priorities, whether it's their pile of GPUs or whether it's the ASICs they just bought or the power contract they just signed or whatever it is. But you have to think about the entire market. This space is so subject to tragedy of the commons in how fast we can mess it up. So, yeah, $1 trillion market cap, I would absolutely bet is going to happen here. But we got to make sure that that's done in a sustainable way that builds up the entire ecosystem and doesn't just lead to a big crash down the road. Agreed.
There's not room for pumping and dumping. There's not room for shilling. I mean, that's maybe my take on it, but I think there needs to be a lot more community development, a lot more open conversations. Let me just shout out to Big Dog 372 for the most recent super chat, and I'll just mention the comment here. Ric Flair would like to be your first student. That's the comment. I think that's directed to you, David. So, Ric Flair, first student.
Ric Flair can come talk to me. I think he might have been from the area. So
Awesome. So it sounds like then you're very open to spreading the wealth, not just of knowledge, but of ability for anybody that has that background, and enough background, right? That is credentialed enough to really approach meaningful work with FPGAs. So how can they get a hold of you, or is there already any kind of like web property that we can open up here to show them that effort?
There is not a web property for that specific effort, but they can get a hold of me. I should figure out a better way. I'm not super active on social media. You can get a hold of me in the Discord at GPUHoarder. We should probably throw a Discord invite up there.
Sure.
To the FPGA Discord, because that's something that not a lot of people know about. That's probably one of the best communities I've ever been part of.
I can tell you, as a fly on the wall, it's been amazing. It's been amazing to watch the conversations, read the conversations. I feel very privileged to be there. Why don't we do this? You guys seek out GPUHoarder on Discord, and if you're cool, if you're an FPGA developer, he'll pull you into the Discord. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, cool. Because I know there's a lot of the other Discord groups. I'm not going to name names. But some of them are kind of like, all right, I'm tired of when moon memes and yeah,
I mean, that's an important thing. There's a lot of serious work getting done there, and also a lot of memes, and we appreciate it too.
Well, sure. I guess what I'm getting at, there's some groups for which it's literally like only when moon memes and then NSFW threads, and it's like, guys, no one can do work under these conditions.
Yeah, okay. I've tried to be really active in the Discord because I want the knowledge and the right knowledge about this community and what's going on to be out there, because misinformation spreads so fast, and all of a sudden, I don't want people to be wasting their hard-earned money. I don't want people to be buying one motherboard because one guy thought it might be the best thing, and everybody's spending $50 more than they have to on motherboards because somebody spread a rumor. So that's important to me, that everybody has the information to make good decisions. And that's part of I'm part of the so-called ASIC resistance in this world. I'm not a fan of centralized hardware, which is a dangerous piece here, because I'm playing a role that is somewhat centralized in hardware to enable what I believe in. But I don't want to be in that place. That's not what we're trying to sit as a permanent setup here.
Right. I mean, I think I can appreciate the irony, but at the same time, I think anybody who's tuning in and has had questions about FPGA development can tell before long in hearing you talk about the work that you've been doing, and certainly with the offer to create an environment for other FPGA developers and FPGA development. I think anybody would understand that you intend to create a more competitive space, and you intend to help decentralize. You didn't go full Joker on them, right? You're not trying to watch the world burn, but you're also not trying to hoard everything, just GPUs.
Yeah, see, I actually just need everybody on FPGA so I can have all my GPUs back.
Secrets out, expose.
Export out of context. There you go. So
awesome. Well, let's
I just think that goes. I just want to say one thing on that, but that
Sure.
goes to my core ethos and my core modus operandi on all of this is the difference between what the big farms have and what happens to someone who can afford to buy a mountain of Bitcoin miners versus the individual miner is far more to do with knowledge gap than economics, right? And that's really, really important to me. Knowledge gap or open of opportunity to get access to hardware, to get access to the right way to build it out and design it, to get access to power even. That's really, really important to me. That is the one reason why I've aligned what we're doing a little bit with what Minority is doing.
Awesome.
Minority has a lot of the same goals there, right? They want to make sure that everyone who is out there mining has access to the same knowledge, the same capabilities, the same hardware. That's a key to the decentralization aspect of all this. And it's a key to building a strong community and a strong ecosystem.
Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like I totally agree that most people are kept from the truth only because they don't know where to find it. Not because they're fundamentally incapable of grokking these ideas or being able to eventually slog through the abstracts and the white papers and then the low-level documentation. Yeah, that's awesome. So that is to be commended, sir. Let's Arstine is asking how big is your hoard? We've only seen a few of the boxes from one angle. So give us some numbers, man. These are juicy details that the community wants to know.
I can't give out all of the details numbers, but I do have more than 1,000 GPUs.
North of 1,000 sounds like you're in mid-level mining territory as a personal collection.
Keep in mind, these were not. Some of these have been bought to mine, but this was not built out as a mining farm.
Cool.
I cringe every time I have to put some of these in 1x risers.
Well, I can only imagine, right? I mean, you're attempting to get like total, like we were talking about before. You're attempting to try to get these things to redline and use every available resource. So I imagine it pains you.
That's the key. Every available resource, and it's only natural that everyone would standardize around something that was the lowest cost to enable just what they needed. But and future proofing is rarely on people's minds. But I'm actually working right now to develop and produce enough of to drive the economics down of 4x or 8x risers that are full electrical 8x, but in the same cable style as like that riser with the USB adapter. Because I really want to encourage people to where and when they can migrate to capabilities that will go beyond just the current proof of work mining. And that covers things like AI mining, render coin, things that we want to do GPU to GPU, GPU to CPU, Acorn enablement. It's just important to have all those resources there and to not artificially limit yourself when you can.
Right. So I've got a couple of playful troll comments from one from Chris Shather. Hey, welcome to the comments section, Chris. Good to see you. And then also from Barry Logan. A few other people have been asking, and with increasing urgency, about the Acorn. Should we give people what they want? Do you have anything you can talk to us about as far as the Acorn? Maybe even a visual aid here?
Absolutely. Let me see. Here's a visual aid. Do you like this heatsink?
Chris made the playful trolling comment about how black boxes for the win.
Black boxes for the win. I have some black boxes, but talk about Acorn. So Acorn's been in development for a while. I announced it. I'm terrible at keeping secrets, it seems, but I announced it because conversation was happening around people buying all these FPGAs at different levels. And I said, I need to let people know that this is coming and out there so that they're aware that they don't have to buy crazy things and that there's different applications. So this is one of the Acorn prototype boards. And anyone that's actually been involved in hardware development would know that when you're first, or not even first, even deep into the hardware and software development cycle, very few hardware shops have hundreds or even 100 prototypes or engineering samples or testing devices sitting there.
Oh,
right?
I'm being prompted to say Acorn. Thanks,
Acorn.
ACV. Yeah, right. Thanks, ACV. Is anybody from Texas down in the comments section? Anybody tuning in from Texas, by the way? So, because if you are, then you'll know that every time you drive near to the gas station Buc-ee's, you actually have to scream the word Buc-ee's.
Yes,
it's a thing. So I think this is along the same vein.
I've got family in Texas, so I understand.
So I think it's great that you got the Acorn. It really it feeds that character, right? So Acorn. Every time that I see one, we'll just say it, guys. Write down in the comments, Acorn. But awesome.
The nice thing about Acorn is the fact that giant FPGA chip takes up the entire width of the board.
That is massive. What's the fabrication process on that? Like, is that?
It's a little bit tricky, but we're taking advantage of a lot of just like the rest of the mining ecosystem, we're taking advantage of a lot of the economies of scale that are out there with NVMe drives right now, right? They put M2, M-key, 32 gigabit a second, 4-lane PCIe slots out there on all of these motherboards, gaming motherboards, a lot of the motherboards that are being used for mining even. And so we're taking advantage of a lot of those capabilities. And it was important to me because I originally developed this for my own use, in our use with some of our GPU acceleration work, that it fit into an M2 slot because PCIe slots are precious. So that said, there's no reason this is restricted to an M2 slot. This board that sits in a 4X PCIe slot, this little host board is probably $5 in volume. So it's a trivial piece there.
Okay. And are there and pardon my ignorance, maybe I should just pull this up in the background back here in Chrome, but looking for like 2, 3, and then 4 slot M.2 adapters for full PCIe. There you go.
I got a couple show and tells here. So right now, this is and Computex was great by the way, for this world, and we didn't even know all this was coming. But this is the Asus Hyper 16X, right? And I can take the Acorn board here, and I can slot that right in there. And I can actually this comes with a pretty massive heatsink with a big fan in it. So we can actually take that Acorn board. I know we're on webcams here. Mount that down to it. Mount 4 of that to that. You can see the thermal paste on the back of this guy.
Nice.
I opened this up just for you, so you can mount that all together, and boom, 116X slot. Any modern BIOS that supports bifurcation, which because of all of these coming out for NVMe drives is a lot of them. This backing card I think is $50 to $60, right? So you're at $12 an Acorn. That's pretty good pricing, and now you've got 4 Acorns in a 16X slot, full bandwidth to each one of them. You're using one lane.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit. I mentioned before we went live here, I mentioned that I have over in the corner, I've got one of these riserless systems, right? I've got an 8-slot riserless system that I've been doing some tests on for months, and the guys, spoiler alert, you're probably going to see a little more over at shop.miner.biz there, and it may or may not make its way into store.minority.io. So I can neither confirm or deny that. But I've got dual GPU cards over there, and somebody asked me, Seth, what if you put in multiple Acorns into that system? Call it an Acorn stuffed system. And then we started making jokes about, chipmunks having their cheeks full and stuff. But Acorn stuffed systems. What does this mean for boards like that? Riserless boards that may have slightly slower PCIe speeds and are likely only one lane, right? Because the controller only runs one lane of PCIe out to those full-size slots. Would something like that work?
So one of the hardest things I've dealt with Acorn is because its application is so different than what everybody in mining is used to doing, right? It's a PCIe X4 device, and it's capable of, you can put a single GPU in a slot that's an X16, X8, X4 slot, and you can put an Acorn, and for some algorithms, for some coins, that's what you want, 1-to-1, essentially, because that GPU can absorb all of the bandwidth, and you can get even 4x GPU performance off one Acorn for certain algorithms. That's not the common case. I've said the common case is about 4-to-1, which is about one full 1x lane to one Acorn. Now, the Acorn lanes on this version of the Acorn, there's a future version of the Acorn that's all PCIe 3 based, has some other great capabilities I'd love to talk about later. Don't hold off for it. It's not coming. You'll get this much earlier. But this is PCIe 2x4, which is enough to get, as I said, a 30 to 32 mega hash gain across a lot of algorithms. And you can split that across GPUs. And particularly if you're interested in the applications to ETH, which I hedge a lot of caution on because that's by far not the best ROI or the best use of Acorn, but it's doable. With ETH, one of the best things you get is power drop. You get a little bit of gain on your cards. The newer your cards, the less the gain, right? Because the cards are almost pushing the envelope themselves. But the power drop can be significant. You can drop as much as 60 watts of power reduction per card when you're using the Acorn to accelerate part of the computation. So to answer your question, in those systems that have 1x lanes, as long as they have either a 4x M2 slot or they have one slot that can be configured X16 to use a host card like we were just talking about, either of the single Acorn or the multiple Acorn host cards, you can still use those. The ones where I worry, and it's just the nature of what happens, is the ones that are just X1 PCIe 1.0, which shouldn't even be necessary because any modern chipset, CPU, everything should be able to support PCIe 2.0. They're going to have a tougher time. It's not off the question. They're not completely unusable. but it's going to be a challenge versus for what you can get and whether it's worth it versus a system that's got at least 1x by PCI 2 for GPUs to Acorn.
Nice. Okay, so it sounds like then this is a real possibility for miners that have systems that that appear lower spec, because most reasonably modern motherboards are clearly PCI Gen 2, PCIe but Gen 2. Sorry, that can't
Gen 3 at this point. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I know a lot of mining OSs require that in order to work. A lot of the troubleshooting that miners will go through is to revert back to PCIe Gen 1 or Gen 2 in order to get all of their GPUs recognized by the OS or by the mining software. So in your early tests, are you noticing that there's any kind of a problem there? What kind of, I mean, if you can speak to it, what kind of popular mining software, popular mining OSs, and popular mining algorithms have you been using in your test benches? And where are you seeing some maybe potential pitfalls that'll help save us some headache when this thing hits the streets?
So as far as miners and mining OSs, that's something that we have to broach into, right? This is a very unique application. You can't download an off-the-shelf miner and plug this in. Nothing will happen, right? The miner has to be aware of this. It has to know what to offload to the Acorn, what to send to the GPU, how to get them to communicate to each other. And that's information that we're going to put out there with all the full API, the bit streams that support it, and the documentation to allow those miners to incorporate Acorn type acceleration. But for the initial volley here, it requires using our miner software that it's best in class miner software. It can operate completely independently on the GPUs. We actually almost released our miner software independently of Acorn earlier this spring, but went back and did some more work on it. But it's fully aware of how to use Acorn and how to accelerate it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm getting a more tactical question here from Alien about will Hive work, for example, Hive OS, and I think what you're saying is not without modification because it's based on Ubuntu. So
I have to engage with Hive, and they are welcome to reach out to me. We can start the process of engaging on it. There is no reason it can't work. I fully expect it's going to be there. It may not be there on day one, but will depend how fast their team can move and how willing they are to adapt. The way I understand that Hive works, and you have to bear with me a little bit. We have a ton of software developers here. We have a ton of engineers here. I don't use third-party OSs or mining software very often because we don't need to. I'm familiar with it. I know how it works. But Hive, as I understand, basically bundles the miners and puts wrappers around them.
That's correct. So I think most of the mining OSs are essentially just I think it's typically Ubuntu 16.04 LTS to make sure they've got a stable base OS to work from.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do. Is we base off an Ubuntu 16.04 image that has it's essentially our own mining OS, but it's not required to use Acorn. So we can absolutely work with Hive. We can work with any of the other OS packagers that want to incorporate that miner to support Acorn. That's not a problem. It's just going to be on the timetables. They can work with us, and on the timetables, we can get them adequate documentation. So
awesome. Well, I know that. I mean, to Hive OS's credit, guys, if anybody is tuning in and has not tried Hive OS, here's a way that you can support the channel. There's a link down in the description. It would be bit.ly/get_HiveOS, spelled with a capital H, capital O, capital S. And you can try it out. It's free for your first 3 rigs. So if you don't want to commit to putting the entire farm on it, you can always use 3 rigs to get started, get your feet wet. But I was really impressed with how quickly they integrated the enlargement pill. They were one of the first. It seemed like it was within 72 hours of having somebody ask on GitHub about that. And they said, yeah, hold my beer. Done.
Yep. And I think they and I have taken a look at Hive OS. I just haven't worked with their engineering team on the Acorn side of it yet. But I really do think that they do a good job of their interface for implementing all these different miners and how they manage these systems. If we didn't already have our own, I would be looking.
Yeah, awesome. Let me take this in a slightly different direction. Of course, Alien. I'm sorry that the Discord overlay in OBS doesn't show memes because we've got a bunch of Scrat memes from Ice Age.
I've seen them.
You know the guy. Yeah, I'm sure this has been your life since making the announcement of the Acorn. But we've got a couple of Scrat memes. Who is the sort of like proto sort of proto squirrel from Ice Age, always chasing after an acorn. So yeah, and he's just asking acorn, but not when acorn. So I'm Newbie is saying riserless mining boards. Corey is saying like an octominer, I believe. Yes, guys, I was trying not to name names like an octominer.
Yeah. We have an octominer here in our lab. We have Onda boards and all of the other boards that are out there. We've taken a lot of effort, and luckily we have the facilities and the people to do it. Again, taking that load off of all the individual miners who can't afford's the wrong question, but don't have the resources, the time, the energy to do all those tests. We're trying to take that all off the plate, and because of my background, I put a lot of value in those tests and the rigor behind those tests and those numbers. So I'm sorry, everybody, that I'm not just pitching random numbers left out and right. I do just put a lot of value in getting that stuff right.
Awesome. There are a couple of questions that keep popping up. The top question is always availability, right? So availability of FPGAs, specifically availability of FPGAs that fall into this category of specialized for mining, specialized with custom bit streams, the BCU 1525, for example. And availability there, I believe there's already a pre-sale first on FPGA.land, right? That was with you. And then I think that a bit of available stock went to store.minority.io, right? And there's still some there, I think.
Yes, I believe so.
I don't believe it's totally sold out yet. Last time I checked, it was
to make sure that inventory gets widely spread and is widely available. And that's taken saying no sometimes to things that came up on that. So I do want to clarify for everybody, all of the inventory, my team manages here at Swirls is managing all of the inventory for those boards. Minority wanted to list those. Minority wanted to have them available through the hosting. We took a look at that and we said, that's a really great idea. Not everybody can host these. Not everybody can have access to them. And my thing is, I want the access far and wide. And we know that there's constraints right now, availability constraints, other constraints. The ecosystem is still growing. All of the bit streams and all the pieces that we want to get out there that I'm carefully guarding around the performance specs around. I want all those to be out there. And it's very, very important to me that those 5,000 boards that are going out go out extremely successfully. And
awesome.
That, that ecosystem sees great success with those, sees broad algorithm coverages, has the ability to mine the coins they want to mine, has the ability to get their ROI and have their profitability.
Awesome. I've got Corey in the comments mentioning that as of last night, there were just over 400 available on store.minority.io. Guys, you can consider this the fire sale. If you were here on the live stream, the last time that I checked, there were just over 1,200. They are going very fast. So if you are sitting on the fence, at least for the BCU 1525, I don't earn anything by referring you to it, but you better act fast. You really should. I mean, that's not fear of loss. David didn't pay me to say that. Christy didn't pay me to say that. Guys, really, if you want an FPGA, you kind of need to pull the trigger quickly because the refresh on that hardware, it sounds like Xilinx is with you on limiting the number of these units that are going to go into at least dedicated for mining.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot more to it than some centralized party saying this is how many are going out to market.
Sure. Well, let's talk about that. Let's do a deep dive about supply chain. Sorry, not that deep a dive into supply chain, but let's talk at least a little bit about supply chain and kind of how to manage expectations for us as miners, looking at this as a possibility to broaden our hardware portfolio. Right? We may want multiples, and there may be people who've had to be told no. Right? And now we have to wait. So, what does that look like for us as far as getting back to stock levels that allow Joe Miner to get his second, third, or fourth BCU 1525?
I mean, that is dependent on a number of things. There's silicon availability from Xilinx. That is strained. There is, let me put it this way. When we put the order in for 5,000 boards, we strained every long pole lead time component, and we've got teams. There are hundreds of people overall between Xilinx, the distributors, all of the people involved in this, scouring every corner of the world to get the right components to make the 5,000. And I'm not overestimating that. It is a significant challenge to build anything that wasn't expected to be built in that volume on this kind of timeline. These are things that are allocated when AMD or NVIDIA go out to build a big batch of graphics cards. They've been working on allocation for months and months ahead of time.
Yeah.
And you're taking a board that was designed as a development board and as an early lead into data center business. You're taking a board that was produced in very low volumes in the hundreds, that probably, it wouldn't be a stretch to say, they wouldn't produce this many of them in the lifetime of the board. And now you're asking to produce them in a matter of months.
Right. So it's shaking up supply chain quite a bit then, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's going to make a big difference. So that's why I'm extremely skeptical. Everyone be very, very careful on scams, right? Anybody who's out there who's saying that, who isn't an established name, doesn't have an established business, who's saying they're going to just buy the chip and build all these boards themselves. One, this is not, the 1525 is not some money-making venture on our side. Between the logistics costs and the massive time hours put into it, we'll be lucky to break even on the 1525. So if somebody's offering to sell it to you for $1,000, or somebody's saying that they can get you 1,000 of the chips on a board, I would be genuinely surprised. And it's not just the silicon availability, it's the other components on that board, the power components, all of those things. And that's, Whitefire's got posts for mods here where he's asking people to switch inductors and such. Global supply chains that are reasonably accessible to the layman. There are 400 or so of those inductors out there that he's asking to switch to. And if there are, I think, 6 on the board without taking a picture of it up. So you can see how many of those 5,000 can even be modded in that way.
Wow.
And we're deep in supply chain building Acorn, right? We expect to build more than 5 figures worth of Acorns, which is a tremendous undertaking. We should say more than 10,000 Acorns based on the demand we've seen out there. And that is a tremendous undertaking. A lot of the parts in this world are allocated 52 weeks out. There are parts right now that I can place orders for that I will not see till next June. Luckily, we've been placing orders for a while, so we've got some things figured out. But it's a major ask. You can not just go out there, buy these chips, slap them together on a board, and put them out to market in any kind of volume.
But David, I wanna just like slap chips on a board. Good grief.
But that's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, right. Make mining great again. Let me just slap cheap chips on a board. Gosh darn it. All the bad news you've been giving me on this live stream, man.
But that's a dual-edged sword, right? So availability is constrained, but that also means that we're not flooding the market. We're not killing coins who can't take a sudden influx of hash rate. Let's say a really small coin, Lux coin, to pick on them for an example, because I really
because their Block Explorer was down last night. You're kicking the little guy while he's down. Gosh darn you.
I don't want to kick Lux coin, but I really wanted to work with them to make sure that their coin, because it's small and it's fledgling and it's growing, wasn't overexposed to FPGAs, because 5.15.62 was one of the algorithms that was on Whitefire's hot list, and people are running calculators, and that coin cannot take that hash rate. If that was the most profitable coin when the 1525 hit the ground, that's a major issue for that coin. So they made an algorithm change. I don't want to be overly critical of it, but they made an algorithm change that I don't think makes any difference in FPGA resistance at all.
Let's take a hard left turn here, because we're going about an hour and a half, and David, man, this has been so enjoyable, guys. Hasn't this been awesome? In the comments, show David some love. Make sure you let him know how appreciative you are of him taking time to just talk FPGAs, just talk development, just talk mining, talk algos, talk hardware. Right? It's so rare that we get a glimpse of this, and it's been such a breath of fresh air to be able to talk to you about it. Because I love talking to coin projects. I love talking to developers who are forking the same 4 projects over and over again. It's fun. This is just this gets me up in the morning. I'll put it that way. This is the interview that got me out the door and got me like, all right, I got to get everything ready for David. So thank you so much for making time for this. And I don't want to be disrespectful of your time. Can we talk a little more about ASIC resistance? And let's talk about what that means. And let's talk about even what the word decentralization means. Because it seems like you talk to 10 people, you get 10 definitions.
Absolutely. And I can lay out my position on that, which is my biggest resistance to ASIC is it's one single purpose hardware that's going to go in a garbage bin. From from a technical hardware guy that wants.
Sorry, I threw David there for a minute. Somebody made a comment about Big Seth watching you, so I winked at the audience, and David was like, that makes me uncomfortable, Seth. Don't do that. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry. Go on.
Back from the camera a little bit here.
I'm floating out into space now. I've now exiled myself. Go. I'll be quiet. I'm in the vacuum.
No, you're absolutely right. Everybody has a different perspective of what ASIC resistance is. I think there's a core to that's shared perspective, and it's, we don't want one party or one piece of hardware to be able to control a coin, whether that's 51% attack or whether that's just manipulating the markets of the coin. Obviously, miners want to make sure that one party is not going to come out there and take all of their investment in GPUs and crush it by releasing a secret ASIC or secretly mining with ASICs in private until their GPUs are unprofitable.
Yeah.
But that's one piece of it. Users of the coin don't want one centralized party to have the authority to just launch a 51% attack, or perhaps even through social engineering steer the development of a coin. There's a lot of public things that are happening right now around coins that are interestingly just not paying any attention to ASIC resistance. And that's not malicious. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by ignorance. Or preoccupation.
Right. Well, and on the channel, I've been pretty vocally critical of Zuko. Specifically, I'm gonna name names, right? It's not that we want to name any specific coin projects, but they rhyme with Zcash. So,
just look at Ethereum too, right? Look at Ethereum. Ethereum, frankly, I think they're too busy. Their team is too busy with everything they're trying to do with the coin to pay attention to the proof of work thing. And you'll see that in companies all the time. It's not that part works. Stop messing with it until it breaks suddenly and unexpectedly.
Right. But oh man, sometimes what is it? I'm ounce of prevention, pound of cure. What is it? Versus being a penny wise and a pound foolish, to mix metaphors. Anyway, yeah.
I feel that even with the accelerated timetables that are being talked about, I think Ethereum is playing a very dangerous game with their ambivalence to the proof of work side. And the same thing is true of Zook and that team. And I don't want to advocate one way or another. Those are all just my personal opinions and mine only. But if you're going to make a certain stand and build a certain community around a coin, you need to follow that community, and you need to protect that community.
Yeah, totally agreed. And there's so many projects today, especially in the privacy coin realm, so many coin projects today that absolutely owe their existence. I mean, we'll leave alone their success, but their very existence is entirely owed to the small to mid-sized GPU miner, specifically the small to mid-sized GPU miner.
So often, miners are one part of the ecosystem, not all of it. But it's not just the miners, it's the excitement around mining, it's the individuals that it involves, it's the people that talk to people that would never have known about the coin. And that gets glossed over so often. And from a business perspective, when I do business operations, I try to be really, really aware of all of those tangential effects that you can't enumerate or quantify super easily that affect the people being engaged in your project. And that's exactly it.
Yeah. So it's made me sad to see so many project founders kind of lose sight of that recently, and some of them have not been returning my calls to be on the show. And small surprise, I think they have an idea that my intention is to talk to them about the future of proof of work, ASIC resistance, for whatever it's worth, decentralization, all these questions. So let's jump back into ASIC resistance and what that really means. And I mean in tactical, practical terms, hands-on, the way we all wrap our arms around this problem and turn it around. What does ASIC resistance actually mean?
So for hardware ASIC resistance, which is kind of what I'm here to talk about, is wrapped around the FPGA side of this. It's about removing the gap, right? If ASIC to GPU, even with modern ASIC resistant algorithms, is a 2x to 10x gap, that's big enough that somebody's going to build an ASIC. And that's big enough that somebody's going to stop your GPUs from working. So when you take Acorn and you make it so that, one, those 10x advantages don't exist anymore because Acorn just eats those up, and then you limit those 2x advantages. The same thing's true with the 1525. You've got FPGAs broadly out there, price competitive with GPUs, and they can do 10x performance on some of these algorithms. Now your ASIC at 10x, 20x, 30x. The easy ASICs are out there. right? The easy ASICs algorithms are out there, and the algorithms that are out there now are hard. But I'll lay down the definitive statement, and Christy would hate me for this, but there is nothing a GPU can do that an FPGA can't do better.
Oh, shots fired. Oh, let's talk about this. We're going into overtime. Hold on a second. We actually did.
No problem.
Come on
and
now.
I know tell me where our time limit is here, because I could just keep going.
No, for my intents and purposes, we've got folks on the Eastern Seaboard that. There we go. There's a Wilhelm cry. Do that again. Right where it hurts. We're talking about GPUs, and I've mentioned on the live stream or in the show in previous episodes that FPGAs do. I mean, from that aspect, they pose a credible threat to the GPU miner. Accessibility, availability, like you mentioned, supply chain just of this particular generation, and being able to mine with meaningful hash rates versus the sheer volume of GPUs out there. We talked about it before, because a GPU that's mining is far more valuable than an FPGA in warehouse.
Yeah, and I'll put that out there. There are 18 million or so GPUs out there mining. There are 5,000 of these FPGAs and maybe a couple thousand that are already out there of different varieties of FPGAs in market. That's equivalent to 50 to 100,000 GPUs. So orders of magnitude here, that's less than 1% of the GPU market that's out there. So when you're talking about credible threat, that's not a credible threat.
Right. Yeah, no more than foot soldiers are a credible threat to, say, a Navy or an Air Force. Yeah, just the even, that's a terrible example. Yeah, maybe a couple of stealth fighters versus an already well assembled militia of millions of people. Probably a better comparison there, because you can do more heavy lifting with that, with all those bodies. So let's talk a little bit about what that means right now. We're back on the cusp. Like, it's history repeating itself, right? What was it? 2013. Was that about right when FPGAs started to hit?
Even further back, right?
So 2011-ish, I want to say. Okay, so 2011-ish, you're looking at FPGAs starting to mine Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And
a narrow window of time, right? Some months before ASICs were brought.
Right. So we're in this really delicate twilight. Not even twilight, right? It's dawn, right? It's the dawn of FPGAs again.
Didn't mean to cut you off, right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, but it's the dawn of FPGAs again. So we've got this interesting, golden light that's being shed on FPGAs, where they have this wonderful moment. And so what does this mean for ASIC resistance to have FPGAs be a part of the picture, to have this window where we know that they're an advantage? How do we make that fit as GPU miners? How does that become copacetic with our aims of decentralized hardware?
It's exactly that. It's making those FPGAs be available broadly, not just from one source. And this is the hard part of economics, right? It takes one source to coordinate some of this stuff. We'd never be able to do this as a whole bunch of individuals going to Xilinx trying to grab FPGAs. We just wouldn't. So yes, right now I've kind of been forced in the position of acting as one source to make these things available, but that's not going to be the long game here, right? Xilinx is going to want in on this market. There are two parties in this market, right? There are Intel and there's Xilinx. It's no different than NVIDIA and GPU. And both of them are going to want to make these available. And just like there's NVIDIA GPUs, and then there's PNI's version and all the AICs, that's going to exist in this space. And I think what you're going to see, and if I point to some mysterious cloaked device, which under this cloak is next generation FPGAs.
Why? Hey, wait a second. Why is it gagged and bound? You got to let it loose. You monster.
A little sneak peek there. Okay.
Oh, you guys, you saw it here first. The corner of a PCB that may or may not be an awesome FPGA.
So these are coming, and this is no secret to everybody. But the biggest difference between FPGAs and GPUs right now is memory bandwidth, right? And,
yeah. So I'm sorry, and that brings up, this is very topical, but it brings up a question that was already brought up in the Discord comments. I don't want you to think you've been abandoned, Alien. I think it was Alien that asked specifically, or earlier on, about FPGAs with HBM memory interfaces. or the likelihood of getting into next gen memory interfaces with FPGA. Is this something that is that's openly talked about, or is it anything that we can discuss here?
We can discuss it to a certain level. I have information that I can't share, and I apologize for that. I would share it if I could. I don't want to lose my relationships with the parties involved. But with that said, there's an important distinction on HBM on an FPGA, right? HBM on an FPGA and HBM on a GPU is still one HBM's worth of bandwidth. This is why GPUs are not dying. But we have another entrant here that is the same as HBM on an ASIC, where a GPU is not the same as HBM on an ASIC. It's got the HBM bandwidth, but it would have much more compute capability than the GPU does on an ASIC. But that FPGA puts a little barrier there on the compute side and makes it super non-incentivized for ASIC makers to go make that HBM ASIC to come out there into market.
It does seem hyper specialized for sure. And I think most of us are only aware of HBM as a broad category of memory interface because of our exposure to GPUs.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what you're saying is there's a chance.
I'm saying there's a chance, and I'm saying it's going to be a good thing, and it is not going to kill GPUs. You're not going to have, I stuck 2 HBM stacks or 5 HBM stacks or 8 HBM stacks on one FPGA. Now it's 10 times more powerful on ETH than a GPU. And that's a really important distinction. But now it's one more type of GPU. It's one more variation of hardware. The same way there are coins that are great on NVIDIA, there are coins that are great on AMD. They're different coins. I think you're going to see the same thing coming out with FPGAs here. So it's a whole ecosystem. And if you really want to be decentralized and you really want to have ASIC resistance against basically silicon wafer access, it's a great approach to it.
Nice. Hey guys, I appreciate in the comment section that there's been some effort to protect David's interests here. He has hardware partners and he has various strategic alignments that allow him to do the work that he's doing, which is meaningful for our community. So if you have a problem with him saying occasionally, I can't answer that, well, then you can go find a live stream with a different FPGA developer. Thank you very much.
And I can be very clear on that. I can't answer you the architectural design of next generation HBM that's not yet announced.
It's a very good way of putting it. Very good way of putting it. So awesome. Let me just mention also, guys, for the channel, for the benefit of anybody who's just tuning into the channel, if you haven't already subscribed, feel free to subscribe. Be sure you click the bell icon so that you know when we go live. Occasionally, I haven't done custom webhooks to notify you on Discord. I apologize, being lazy, because I'm not a programmer. I just play one on YouTube, and and so yeah, sometimes it's hard to be notified unless you click the bell icon. Yeah, sorry, I'm giving Big Brother more of what they don't need, more control, but it's the fastest way to be notified for live streams. Occasionally, we'll have anonymous projects on the show, and we protect their anonymity. Guys, answer me this.
Really tricky thing, right? It's the same way as all of the performance stats on Acorns that everyone would love me to just leak out a little bit at a time. I'm not hoarding those. I'm not hoarding those performance stats because I want to have some secret advantage over you. I'm hoarding them because I want to give you all of the right things at the right time that are correct and not be lying to you or telling you something that came off a 1x test that wasn't verified through a duplicate test and done in a scientific manner. It's important to have correctness over speed in some of these spaces.
Yeah, awesome. So hey, I got a request from Gabby to ask more questions, say less words. Sorry, Gabby, that's a no can do. This is a talk show. It is if you wanted David to outline a white paper, then you should probably read his research. So the show's gonna flow the way it flows. But I do have more questions to ask you, and I apologize if I interrupt you too much.
Let me try to give you direct answers.
Yeah, awesome. So okay, I got a couple of questions. Got a couple of questions from some other folks about specifically Acorn, about specifically algos that are on the roadmap today, known performance benefits for different algos today. What can we look forward to if we are rapidly buying up the 400 and change remaining BCU 1525 units from Minority? And what can we look forward to if we are expressing interest in the Acorn today?
Okay, So algorithms that you should be thinking about and looking at from coin perspective on the BCU 1525, Kryptonite V7, Kryptonite Heavy. Don't discount ET hash. We haven't talked about it. There's things out there. It's not 1,800 mega hashes. It is not anywhere near 1,000 mega hashes.
Thank you for clearing up the concern, because I know that both Rory and I we've been fed a line by other sources. So
that video is a video of Tribus mining, by the way.
Yeah. Hey,
Tribus hash rates.
Okay. Can I just quickly throw out a disclaimer here as well? I know that Rory over at Buried One, he would not intentionally lead astray any of his viewership. He just reports what he finds. So
I actually know exactly where that video came from. I know exactly the room it was filmed in. So I'm very cautious about that. And that's exactly the kind of misinformation that's out there. So I'm actually hopeful that somebody watching this is going to realize that they bought a BCU 1525 based on that video. And wait a second, that wasn't accurate. I can't mine ETH at 1,899 mega hashes and wants to return it, because I'd much rather that than they're misled on what's out there.
Right. So it sounds like then today things we can look forward to are Kryptonite variants, right? So Kryptonite V7, Kryptonite Heavy, and Kryptonite Light as well.
There's a lot of interesting Kryptonite Light that's been out there. So I've owned most of the Kryptonite development. There's other groups that are working on it very hard. I've been very careful with releasing my Kryptonite side. Kryptonite is a really interesting ecosystem. They're very fork happy, and I really want, and I'm happy to talk to any of the Kryptonite developers about exactly where FPGA is going to be from a performance standpoint, and how we can make sure that that's something that doesn't harm their network, but is a benefit and an ASIC resistance benefit, because I really don't want to crush a coin. So I've been very cautious about the Kryptonite algorithms, but there's a ton of interest. There's some really great performance on them. And there's a lot of people in the ecosystem excited about it.
Yeah, let me just quickly. I've got a response from Alien whose opinion I trust on our audio levels. It sounds like your mic is a little bit low. The gain is a little bit low. So I'm going to ask you midstream to go down to the your bottom left-hand corner of Zoom, and then there should be some options for you to adjust your microphone from there.
I gotcha. How's that sound?
Loud and clear, buddy.
Gotcha. So just kind of going down the rest of the list, work that we've done, because we've done work on Acorn first, right? And Acorn is focused on, it's got an ET hash component. It's not the most profitable ROI algorithm, but I put it out there. I actually think X16R is the most fun with Acorn because of what it enables. Go read the X16R white paper and look at the 16 algorithms that are in there, and look at that chart that's in there of the time it takes for each of those algorithms. Now, when you put those algorithms on an FPGA, it is not a normalized identical chart of that timing, right? It's not the FPGA is just 10x better at all these algorithms. It's completely different. The FPGA has completely different strengths. So when you combine those strengths, you get some great things on X16R, X16S. The same kind of principles hold through in other algorithms along those lines, time travel 10. There's a lot of work being done on Lyra-based algorithms. Lyra 2Z has got a ton of work on it. There's some work been done on Lyra Rev 2. Not a lot of work's being done on Equihash, and I think a lot of that has more to do with how that ecosystem's shaking up right now. So some of you may have seen that I tore apart the Z9 Equihash ASIC yesterday.
No, do you have a video of it? Where's that?
I do not have a video of it. I posted a couple pictures in the Discord. Maybe I'll post let me see what I can show real easily here. Just a fun little, I don't know if you can see that, fun little die shot, partial die shot. Nice. We tore it down. We went all the way under the microscope. We know exactly how it was built. It's about 144 megabytes of memory exactly sitting on that thing. Really unique design, but I can tell you that those Equihash forks are going to be, at least as far as the Z9 Mini is concerned, 100% effective. Okay, yeah, got it. I spoke to a couple of projects that have forked to Equihash, 144.5, and they were confident that would be the case for them. They didn't seem to know roughly how much time it would buy, but frankly, nobody knows for sure. But it seems like even still, like with what Fluffy Pony's doing on Monero, it seems like they're kind of, you almost would need to just commit to there being some kind of a regular check-in, right? As a scheduled maintenance of your proof of work algo. Yeah. And it's it's interesting, and that's something that the FPGA world is just a blip in the bucket, and that's why it's so important to work with the FPGA groups. I mean, these are going to be out there. They're going to be out there whether I put them out there or somebody else puts them out there in private. We'd rather them be out there in public. So anyone who's doing algorithm development, proof of work development, and wants the opinion on the FPGA side and whether it's resistant or not, I'll do it both ways. I mentioned a coin earlier. Maybe I shouldn't mention directly, but I'm really happy to review proposed proof of works that are supposed to be FPGA resistant and make them such. I want to respect what the coins want to do. I think that's foolish. I think that GPUs and FPGAs working together is a much better long-term ASIC policy. But I'm pretty deep into FPGAs here, right? I can't be completely unbiased in that statement.
Sure. On that note, I've got a question from the YouTube comments, and I think this is pretty relevant. Right now, is it possible to use the BCU 1525 to accelerate mining of GPUs the way that the Acorn does?
You said right now, to which I say it's not been a focus of development.
Got it. So anything is possible then.
Expensive board, right?
Okay.
This is a drastically more expensive board. The Acorn pricing starts at $199 for the lower end. It's designed for ET hash and lightweight power savings accelerate, and is at $329 for the high end. It's capable of running some algorithms completely on its own. That's less than a tenth of this. It's more in line with GPU pricing. So you can use a tiny portion of the BCU to do the same thing in theory. It's something that we might consider in the future, but why would you do that? Why would you not just run the BCU independently? If you're an RTL developer, or we get a glut of FPGA developers that really want to make this space awesome, absolutely put a BCU in there because you can afford one. You got one in there. Put a bunch of GPUs in there as well. Program the BCU to accelerate your GPUs and use the rest left over to dual mine. I don't think you're going to see standardized bit streams and software for that anytime soon. It's just a little bit more niche of a use case.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like then maybe any mid scale to large scale miners might be interested in a solution like that to accelerate a rack.
And that's only going to be viable if they have, which please do. Everyone that is building 1X systems right now, stop. No.
You guys, you heard it here. Not first, actually. Christy was really adamant about this too. And I'm interviewing Sanem soon. We're dialing in our interview. So I know with Sanem, Golem, Render Token, I think that they would concur. They want you to
it's going to be necessary, right? Even if we just have ETH switch to point of proof of stake and we lose ETH in the mining ecosystem, you need to be able to apply all those GPUs to other algorithms and other mining sources. And there are great I'm a big fan of the term proof of useful work, which just has its own meaning to me, which is let's do something useful in the proof of work algorithm rather than just something hard.
You, sir. I owe you lunch. Let me jump back to a couple of questions that Justin Birkin has asked, and he thank you for the super chat, Justin. First off, he asks, is it safe to send funds to sales at Squirrel Research for hardware purchases? Is that the intent?
Sales at squirrelsresearch.com is Jessica is managing that on our team. She's a fantastic person. Is managing a ton of logistics on this project. She's the one that's going to respond to you. If anybody needs a get check and they want to hit me on Discord, check an invoice number, check wire info. I'm happy to do that. If it gets extreme, I might have to rescind that offer. But very, very important that everybody knows that this is a completely up and up legitimate operation. I think that there's going to be some ownership of that relationship with the chip provider coming out soon at some point to make that even more abundantly clear.
Awesome. Also, Justin, he follows up that question with a thank you for everything you've done for our community.
Hey, I'm just here to help and to build really cool hardware and take on some interesting challenges. So
cool. Well, it's not just me saying it. Clearly, people are showing their appreciation down in the comments, guys. If you haven't already hit that like button, if you're not already subscribed, I can imagine this, like we did with Christy, turning into a 2-part series, possibly having you back on the show soon. Though I know anybody who's interested in seeing the product of your work probably wants you to get back to the lab.
Yeah, there's a lot of lab work to be done, which I didn't get the chance to show. So this is fun because I can actually power it up here. So this is just a different M2 host, which is important to know. There's a million different M2 hosts. We're working on one that actually holds 2 Acorns and has, I feel dirty saying this, USB 1X riser connectors on it so you don't lose a slot. We're working on that. And the fun thing is because we're working on that, it's going to be really inexpensive to go alongside Acorn. So if you're worried about losing a slot and you have that X16 or even X8 in this case slot available, but you don't want to lose your riser connection to your GPU, it's being worked on. It'll be ready.
Nice. Okay, this is great. I think anytime that we can help scavenge cycles from more platforms, it's just only a good thing.
Yeah. So this is just a different M2 card. It's a cool little one. You can actually put the whole heat sink over in place of the Acorn heat sink if you want to. And I've got it hooked to a Thunderbolt PCIe card, which we're also working on a Thunderbolt enclosure for Acorn. So if you really want to play with algorithms on your laptop, you're going to be able to do that.
Nice. Now Thunderbolt, I want to say the speed of Thunderbolt is about 4 lanes of PCIe, isn't it?
Yep. It's fully capable. I mean, you're fully capable of running the Acorn on a Thunderbolt connection at full speed.
Awesome.
It's actually, I built the enclosure because it makes development a lot easier because I can do some mobile development on the Acorn, and even on the laptop I have here's got a 1050 Ti in it, and that's just a great little combination for doing some testing.
Nice. So, hey guys, make sure you so applause down there for David scratching his own itch as a developer and now turning that into a commercial product that benefits the entire community. That's rad.
Yep. So this is not the final production cooler, but it's very similar. That's on there, the little fan cooler. You get a lot of cooling off fan cooler, but you can get a concept of kind of height wise how that's going to sit. Some people have been asking about that. I'm trying to stay within a 20 millimeter to 25 millimeter height window on that M2 card. It's a 2280 based card. It is 1 millimeter wider because of the FPGA. So if you have a really tight M2 card slot, be careful about that. But we might as well power the thing up just so you guys can see some blinking lights. Top lights on this are the Acorn board, and once it gets its little boot, we should have a little blinky status light right there if you can see that.
Nice.
So just wanted to give you guys the power up.
Awesome. Okay, let me jump back into the comments here. I think I have a few more questions, a few more awesome, relevant questions. There are some. Oh, how nice! A couple of. Oh, got some cool pictures in the Discord chat there. Got a few questions here on YouTube comments, and Alexander asks, David, I'd love to know what you think the long-term mining outcome of the Dagger Hashimoto algo is. Are ASICs inevitable, or will FPGAs and GPUs continue to rule? So the technical feasibility of developing ASICs is an inevitability for any proof of work algorithm. Just like I laid down earlier, that there's nothing that a GPU can do that an FPGA can't potentially do better in the proof of work space. I should have caveated that within the proof of work space, particularly once we're talking about these guys. Got a flash? That's fine. So with that, you gotta watch out. That's like in theater, that's known as Chekhov's gun. And the dramatic theory is that if you show a gun in the first act, then by the third act, it must go off.
Well, the third act is coming. So, but once you're talking about HBM availability and once you're talking about other pieces there, it's absolutely true. So to get back to your question on ASIC specifically for Dagger ETH, it exists right now, right? The E3 exists. Well, I think we'll see some of them here soon. I'll do a die shot. If somebody wants to either send me one, I'll buy it off you. I did not order one. So I can do the same thing I did with Gyrsos, and that was tremendous of him. I'm going to pay him for the delta there, but we took one of the boards off. We popped one of the chips off. We fixed the board up so it would run on its as a 3-legged dog. Put it back together for him. I'll replace the hash board as soon as I can for him on it. But it was tremendous that he made that available. So if someone has got an E3 coming, they're willing to part with or do a deal with me on, I'm happy to do another die shot of that, get a full tear down, because it's important for everybody to know. I'm all about this kind of open hardware side of this and minimize the secrets, minimize the how does this thing work. There's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of misinformation.
Nice.
But it's going to exist. But ETH is one of the most ASIC resistant algorithms that's out there, period. What Christy's doing with Prog POW is actually extremely valuable. I withhold judgment on how the FPGAs sit on that, but I can tell you it's not going to be destroyed by FPGAs. If prog POW is out there, and it absolutely is an improvement on ETH. So I wish Ethereum would adopt it. Some of you may have caught that I actually did the first ETH ASIC resistant proposal, which was put out there, the EIP, forget which number. And I originally actually wanted that to have a greater scope, but we trimmed it down to a minimal scope to break the ASIC based on the probability of getting that through and getting that in field. And then, of course, Christy did the second one with prog POW, which is a much expanded intent, aim for the same intent. So that's really important. It would be really important for that to get adopted. Even if ETH is going to switch full POS in 6 months, it would be really important for that defense to be out there, because there are things being developed or that exist in the ASIC world that could be extremely damaging to the network.
So these are imminent threats then in terms of proof of work. Okay, awesome. Let's talk about proof of work in general. Well, then let's keep going down that rabbit hole, actually. So you already invoked X16R, and you mentioned looking at the time to solve each algo in that cycle. And I've done the liberty of already pulling that up. So here it is, relative time per hash algorithm. And you've got a few here that are maybe a little more challenging. And then the question has come up from a few members of the community. A few members of the community have asked, what if you, and I mean, I know it's the same problem over and over again, but now you add prog POW to this mix. It'd be X, whatever the next iteration is, right? X18 or something, X17. Yeah. So
this is the worst trend in algorithm development for actual ASIC resistance that I've ever seen. This idea that you're going to chain all these algorithms together and it's somehow harder. And I think those that don't necessarily work in hardware, and that's pretty critical, but it's critical for a reason. Those that don't work in hardware don't realize that ASICs, FPGAs, they have the best in-class chip-to-chip communication that exists, and it's not horribly expensive. Your PCIe slot has 16 lanes that run at 8 gigabit a second. The high-end Vertex chips, including the one that's in the 1525, have up to 120 lanes that are capable of running at 32 gigabytes a second that can communicate chip-to-chip. And the state between each of those hash algorithms in X16R, even if you chain prog POW on the back of it, is a 512-bit state, or a 256-bit state in some algorithms case. You can fit gigahashes of that state in that chip-to-chip bandwidth. So you're not limiting anything by requiring high ASIC area. You're just requiring a lot of little chips with a sequencer or with another technique to switch between those algorithms. If you really want to develop something that's ASIC resistant that somehow is just built on throwing a bunch of things in a bin and stirring them up, you would have to completely change the data path to be a very, very wide data path between those algorithms. And then you're very likely, when you do that, to expose some serious actual mathematical or algorithmic vulnerabilities.
Got it. So let's talk about hybrid, or I'm not going to call it hybrid proof of work, but this trend, like you're saying, the multi-algo cycles, where essentially you can throw different hardware. You can throw a mix of hardware that we talked about. We started the conversation, right, with mixed compute. That's essentially all this is, right? Yep. Once you create a custom built ASIC, you are now doing mixed compute because you're just telling it, hey, you're specialized for one thing. So this mixed hardware environment and these multi-algo cycles. Let's throw prog POW into the mix, because this is a question that I've seen come up. What if you threw prog POW into the mix and you still did a multi-algo cycle?
So
net positive, net negative, just dumb?
Your GPUs are still going to be horrible at managing. Let's say you have 16 algorithms ahead of it, and they're all made from this document and made from this list. Your GPU is still going to be, on a relative scale, about a tenth of the performance of an FPGA or a dedicated ASIC on, or let's take GPUs out of it. Let's just say your E3 miner, right? Or your E3 miner adapted for prog POW, or your GPU can go sit there and churn through the prog POW part. And then when you mix in all these other parts, they can be done at 10x the performance, which means at most, by adding all those other 16 parts, you've done a 10% performance hit. Meanwhile, your GPU your GPU has to take the full performance hit. You're just actually making it easier for ASICs.
Okay, got it.
If you're doing prog POW, do prog POW by itself. These do not add anything to it.
Got it. So it's not so much that it's about async. I think the question that I'm getting, like the spirit of the question that I'm receiving when people are asking about that is there any kind of, I guess total network hash rate just goes up linearly anyway. So yeah, they're asking about like power consumption, hash rates. What's the net effect there? It sounds like it's, to your point, either commit to one algo that is unique and difficult, or or just step away. It seems like it's this perverse algo arms race.
I've been in security long enough. The more complex you make something, the more chances you have to make a mistake or to leave a vulnerability that stays secret and stays private and builds an specially optimized ASIC that takes advantage of it.
Awesome. Well, let's do this. Let's pivot a little bit into the future of proof of work, and something that you brought up that I'm a huge fan of, if you've seen any of the interviews, is alternate proofs of work and proof of useful work. Something that actually helps to, in itself, provide intrinsic value to a third party. So not something that serves only cryptographic hashing functions, but that leverages the unique architecture of the various kinds of IT that we're throwing at this problem, and and makes the world better in some additional way. So
yes, and that's an area that's really, really interesting to me, and I've spent a lot of time looking at and working on. And some of the big problems that we have right now are mining was built on horrible infrastructure, right? It was built the cheapest thing to mine ETH or to mine something, and everybody said we only need 1x. We can use PCIe 1.0 for this. This is why I'm really concerned on the FPGAs when people are saying, well, let's just put these out there with a USB hub and powered risers that aren't connected to anything. Great for the next 2 months, and then everybody just build out all this infrastructure that doesn't support actual useful work, doesn't support even some of the ASIC resistant algorithm approaches. So that infrastructure has to begin adapting. And it will. So the market follows the profitability. So as you work on these proof of useful work algorithms, and it's dangerous, right? Rendering can't absorb 18 million GPUs. AI, honestly, probably can't absorb 18 million GPUs.
So I disagree. But the thing is, I can't publicly talk about the use case for. I can't. No, I'm doing it. I can't publicly talk about the use case for 18 million GPUs being used for rendering. Because there are so many applications for rendering.
Well, 18 million GPUs on 1x can't be used for rendering. I would say that.
Sure. Agreed.
So those are very, very interesting problems, but it's going to require some shifts. And I'm really excited to see some of those algorithms start to take off, even in smaller form. They don't have to absorb 18 million GPUs all at once, because it is going to drive some of that infrastructure, some of that hosting infrastructure, network infrastructure, to spend 10% more to be able to make the profit that's going to build out a foundational network that is just amazing, right? This is an amazing amount of computational power. It's an amazing amount of things that can be put to useful work once some of those infrastructure directions are taken.
Right. It's like to use the auto analogy, right? Like the use case or the argument for starting with an exhaust replacement, because you've got all that horsepower up front, but you're sipping through a straw. Yes.
Very familiar with the side of that. Cool. And that's something that on the VCU, right? One of the big things you've got are these, which I'm probably going to install upside down here. But these are the QSFP cables, right? And this is 100 gigabit per second cable, potentially more if you take this and you run it in crypto world where you don't care about individual error rates and you can absorb some things. So these cables are expensive, right? Right now, actively working to drive that down. So I'm working on, I'd love to be able to ship one of these, because you need one with each one basically for daisy chaining for some of these algorithms. I'd love to be able to ship all the 1525s that go out with these cables. I'm working towards that. I don't know if we can achieve those costs. As I say, this is not money making. I don't have hardly any margin there to cover anything more than the logistical costs. But if I can negotiate the right thing, and this is where one party can do something useful, we might be able to ship all of those with one of these cables instead of everybody paying.
Okay, what's the name of that cable again?
It's a QSFP 28 cable.
QSFP28.store. Okay, I'm making it right now.
Yep.
Mess with you. So.
And go ahead and pull up retail on what these cables are.
Sure.
Even the eBay pricing on these cables, they're not prohibitively expensive, but I mean, look at that one on the very first one.
Jeez.
That's an optical version, right? You should probably put DAC on this. So QSFP28 is often used to attach to optical transceivers. Those are just like Thunderbolt optical. It was mystically rumored they're extremely expensive. DAC is direct attach cables, and they are short copper cables like the one I was just showing you.
Got it. Yeah, you should be able to get 100 gigabits bandwidth at a short run on copper.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And I think there was recently something that came out that showed them linking together a ton of PCIe extension cables and how many meters they could actually get at full speed. Was impressive. I wish I could. The link is somewhere in the Discord, but they found amazing things on length. But if you look at that, even here, $56 cable, that's still a very expensive cable. But think about USB risers, right? So one thing we are doing is absolutely shipping each one of the 1525s with a good quality riser. And the reason for that is if you start plugging these things into SATA risers or whatever else people put them into, you're going to burn things up. These can pull full power or more depending on the algorithm developer through the PCIe slot. They can do 350 watts on a card that was spec for 200. We want to make sure everybody has a good quality riser, both on the reliability side for the communication and on the power delivery side. So we're testing these to the point of blow up from the manufacturer before we include, but we're including one of these, a good 6-pin riser with every single one of the VCUs. Off topic, on topic, each one of these comes with a super speed USB cable. And these were extremely expensive. Now you can go to Monoprice and get them cheap, etc. But they are extremely cheap now to the point where you can get risers for a couple bucks, including this cable, because of the volume. So the same thing can happen on these QSFP28 cables. So when you're looking at the peripheral things needed to host these, don't get caught up on that and understand that these go into much less volume than something like riser USB cables right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. With the application, it just seems like 100 gigabit bandwidth is, it seems like it's rarely needed, other than I think the last time that I saw anything like that in fiber was for a rendering grid at a studio. And that's pretty specialized.
Yep. And the cables and attachments are priced accordingly. So looking forward to being able to offer that. I'm trying to keep everybody from having to spend the extra pennies that they don't need to on this, because it doesn't help anybody. If everybody goes out here and buys, this 56 is not a horrible price compared to some of the ones that are out there. But if everybody goes and spends $56 on a cable times 5,000 cards, that's a huge amount of money that didn't need to be spent.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, let's do this. We're coming up on, oh my gosh, we've been chatting for over 2 hours. I thought it was almost 2 hours. 2 hours, 15 minutes. Why don't we do this? I'd love to have you back on the show. I'd love to talk more about FPGAs. Clearly, there's huge anticipation. We'll see if Minority even has any left at the end of the day. If you're watching this in the replay, sorry, early bird gets the worm. But Acorn, I know there were a lot of questions that people still had about Acorn, and I don't want to completely jam up your day unless you're game for a little more, or maybe we cut the live stream and come back.
We're 6:15. You want to go 15 more minutes and try to answer some questions?
Awesome. Yeah. Acorn only. How about that?
Acorn only.
Okay.
I want to get questions answered where I can.
Okay. So guys, go ahead and drop those questions down in the comment section of YouTube about the Acorn. I know I had one already that was a little farther back in the queue about temperature for the Acorn. What's the ideal temperature, operating temperature for the Acorn as soon as we have take delivery and start implementing it?
Okay, so I know that these are going into miners. So I told my thermal engineering guys, 30 degrees C is the designed operating temperature, 25 is a nice ideal, 40 degrees C is the realistic upper operating temperature where I expect these to be used. Okay,
awesome. And as far as heatsink, pardon my ignorance, but can you tell us about the delivered characteristics of the Acorn when it ships?
So I'm ensuring that the Acorn ships with a heatsink that's fully capable of delivering or dissipating the 15 watt TDP. That's the official TDP. course, we can push it a little bit more. We're doing some tests right now because we don't want to burn out people's M2 slots. So we want to stay within spec there. We've actually looked at options to add an external power connector to it that could make it a little more powerful, but we're trying to keep this accessible and not have 18 cables hanging off the side of it.
Got it. So in concrete terms, that heatsink, what kind of cubic airflow would we need? Cubic feet per minute?
I'm only shipping these with a active heatsink, and you can kind of see it on this one again.
Got it. Okay.
This is development profile. This is not the exact heatsink, but the design is incredibly similar. So this has a little baby fan, on it. And when you're doing thermal designs, and thermal engineers out there can back this, even a tiny bit of airflow over a heatsink makes a massive amount of difference. And so this is a cheap extruded aluminum heatsink. I'm really looking at doing this with skeeved copper fins because I want this to be able to fully dissipate that 15 watts, run at full performance, not have to deal with throttling like you see on NVMe drives.
Got it. So airflow is not gonna. It sounds like airflow is yet to be determined, depending on the materials for your heatsink.
If your ambient environment around your motherboard is 30 degrees to 35 degrees C, you're going to be in good shape. So that doesn't take a ton of airflow to do. But as far as blowing airflow directly over the fins of the heatsink, it's got onboard fan for that. It's very low wattage overhead, less than a watt overhead for the fan. So
okay. Cool. So you already mentioned active heatsink that's going to come with, so it shouldn't be a problem regardless of the operating temperature. You're going to handle that.
Yep.
Awesome. I had another question about the Acorn from earlier on, and it had to do with algos that the Acorn can accelerate. As of today, what can we look forward to with the Acorn, not BCU 1525? Yep.
Okay. Pulling my list up here. So one thing I want to be very, very careful about is the kryptonite algorithms. Acorn is not horribly suitable for kryptonite. There are some developers on the forum who are probably going to have access to some developed versions of Acorns very soon here that have ideas of how it could be used in that, but it's not something that I've approached. So Acorn kryptonite is not really the ideal combination. That's something that's best handled on a Vega or a BCU 1525. ET hash, of course, is a ton of interest in that. Primary gains on ET hash are going to be power, but you'll see a little bit of performance gain there as well. Algorithms like X16R, that is a very good use of the 1525 or the Acorn. Other algorithms that are useful, you can do Ketchik on it. Ketchik is not horribly profitable right now. I can actually give you a number on that. I can do about 1.2 gigahashes of Ketchik on the high-end version of it, which is a sizable number, right? Amount of Ketchik. That's about double what a 570 does.
Okay, but hey, I mean, the economics, they work out, really. If you're doing double what a 570 does at about the same price or less.
Yep, and that's interesting if you're looking at some of the OXBTC clones, which are modified Ketchik. So when you're talking about standalone capabilities, there's that. It can deal with other algorithms that are out there. Bringing up my list. So you can fit, you can accelerate if you're interested trying to play with the NIST 5 stuff. That's largely the territory of ASICs and other FPGAs right now. I wouldn't recommend it. You can fit Grossel on there. I've got a lot of interest lately in Script-N.
Okay.
People are asking about Script-N, and it's not something I've looked at, but it's something I'm willing to look at. You can do both Phi 162 and the new Phi 2 on it.
Nice.
Be gentle to LuxCoin.
Right, they're still tender from that Block Explorer crashing. Can I ask, there's another question I'm getting in the comments repeatedly is Acorn plus ETH largement. Net positive?
Absolutely. Acorn, the miner that ships with Acorn will ship with ETH largement.
Okay, and so, but let's completely silo that application. And now let's talk about separate miners. I guess, is there even an option to run Acorn without ETH largement when doing Dagger, or no?
Yeah, so ETH largement's great, right? But it really is great for a certain subset of cards. That doesn't mean that the miner that's running ETH largement can't run the other subsets of cards, right? It can run ET hash on all of the other cards at normal rates.
Okay.
Awesome. Your question?
Yeah, I think so, because I keep getting questions about Acorn plus ETH largement. So you mentioned X16R, X16S, or other multi-algo cycles.
Yeah, X16S is fine. Time Travel 10 is also interesting. I'm trying to work off my list here so I don't speak out. Sorry, I can't show you my list. There's a lot of other pieces on there that aren't ready. Time Travel 10 is another one that is just as applicable. I actually think Lyra 2 Rev 2 is interesting. Some of the Lyra algorithms are really interesting because the GPU part is great at the core Lyra part, and the other parts around it just waste GPU speed. So that's a great application for Acorn.
Nice. Okay, so maybe a better question is...
I think I covered all the ones that are part of the test scheme here. So anything else would be I can answer if you want to ask me on the Discord or ask public on the Discord. I can take a look at the algorithm and tell you whether I think it could be applicable. But the ones I just talked about are ones that are part of our test scheme.
Very cool. Top question I'm getting from the comments has to do with Equihash at this point, and now variants of Equihash. Equihash 1445 is I think the top forked variant. Yep. So today, any news with Acorn?
Nothing that I'm doing on Acorn with Equihash right now. Mostly because of all the forking and everything that's going on. It's not out of the question, although Equihash is much more a lot like Kryptonite. It's much more GPU only focused. There are creative ways to solve that problem. There are time memory trade-offs. There are organizational trade-offs that could certainly make use of Acorn, but it's not work that I've done, so I can't speak to it.
Got it. Timothy is asking X17.
What did they add in X17? The short answer is yes, it's applicable to that, but I haven't done the work specifically on X17, but the same principles are applicable.
Got it. So the final remaining algo, whatever that may be, is...
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
And it's just a matter of, I mean, if you take any of the existing chain algorithms and you add more things with regards to Acorn's still going to be great at the parts of it that it's great at. It could be great at the new thing you added, but if it's not, the GPU just does it. So you're not really making it harder for Acorn if you're leaving other things in there that the GPU can't do well.
Right. So the X16 possibly at worst case scenario is 1/17 slower than the application.
Yep.
Got it. Noted. All right. So Alien, stop it. He's asking X231.
This is the key. I mean, FPGAs are much more capable of working on that level. There are crazy things we can do. The Acorn hardware is designed with memory on board for bit streams, where it can dynamically reconfigure parts of itself mid-algorithm or store temporary state and bounce it off back and forth. There are crazy things we can do. I'd love to nerd out about all the engineering, but for most of the audience here's sake, I want to stick to what's real and what exists.
Okay, so on that note, I've got Flakfired. Hey, thank you, Flakfired, for making yourself known. Flakfired is with the Vertcoin community, and he's asking specifically about Lyra 2 Rev 2, just your thoughts in general, and let's maybe relate it to the Acorn. Yeah,
so Lyra 2 Rev 2, if I'm calling off the top of my head, keep in mind there's a lot of people working on this stuff, not just me, has a 256-bit internal state, I believe, which means it's capable of moving almost 60 megahashes to and from the Acorn. And so... yes, there are portions of that algorithm that can be heavily accelerated by Acorn.
Okay.
Even more so than X16R because of the intermittent state size.
Awesome. Okay, this is great news. By the way, we're going to have Vertcoin on the channel not too long from now, guys. So,
and I'd love to talk to their developers and understand, one, do they support that? Do they want to work against that? Do they want to change their algorithm to resist it? Do they want to embrace it? My perspective, this is part of the ASIC resistance side, right? If you've got essentially near ASIC level performance helping your GPU on these algorithms, and we've got these broadly available, and they're at an extremely cheap price point where they should be fully accessible, then you're helping yourself in ASIC resistant if you embrace it. But I want to be respectful of what the community wants, the coin devs want. So if they want to work with me on it, they want to talk to me about it, reach out.
Awesome. And I'll follow up when I do the interview with Vertcoin, just to give that call out some extra amplification. So guys, I got another question. I don't want to take too much of David's time here. Lance asks, can you comment on AMD and Linux versus Windows support for the Acorn? And then also, so follow-up question.
Acorn will have both Linux and Windows support on both the miner side. And the fun thing is, alongside this, we're also putting out a really good cross-platform miner that works in both CLI mode and GUI mode on Linux and Windows. And you don't actually need Acorn to use it. So that part's cool. But yeah, Windows and Linux support are both going to be there. I don't understand why people mine on Windows, but if they want to, okay.
Thank you.
I do have to short shout out to the one DJ who is Dave, also Dave, who's here local to me in North Canton, who's provided a lot of little hardware and pieces to help with some of this testing from his business. So I do have to give him that shout out.
Okay, awesome. So Flackfired from Vertcoin says they're working on a new algo. I'll still follow up with them on when we chat, have them reach out to you, because it sounds like it would be worth their while.
Yep.
So we've got another question here from about, and you know, we chatted briefly about availability. That's always the question, right? So how much, how soon, how fast, right?
Okay. I have to be very cautious because I don't want to commit things that are not there. I expect that we're going to do pre-orders here within 2 weeks or less, most likely less. We're structuring around the holiday here in the U.S. But the production window for these things is going to ramp in August. So some of these are going to be available in August, and I expect to be able to meet demand within Q3. So I am super hesitant to put those numbers out there, but I expect to be able to meet demand within Q3 is the short version of that.
Got it. So we're looking at a fairly a big production run then. This is being directed by the community, the production run.
Yeah. So we have worked extensively in planning and building out this production run, and we even have multiple PCB revisions for not critical components, but just components that are in short supply to be able to use 2 different supply chains and dual source. There's a lot of pieces that go into this, similar to the vendors who use 2 different memory chips to achieve things, except you're not going to have to deal with, did I get the right memory chip? The performance is the same across both of them, but we've taken steps to ensure that we can meet at least current demand. That can always exceed, but we're ramping on it. And then actually the Acorn ramp is actually going smoother than the BCU 1525 ramp. So
yeah, awesome. This is great. Okay, so I'm pretty sure these are the top questions people have are with availability. Of course, it sounds like delivery date or with launch date. Clearly, it would be unwise to say that it's going to happen by a certain date. You mentioned pre-orders, hopefully within about the next 2 weeks, just to summarize, about the next 2 weeks or so?
Yep.
Okay,
and
we
will absolutely open pre-orders within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, and interest lists are already on the current survey that you have available on Squirrel's Research, right?
Yep, and if you take that survey, and we just, again, we announced Acorn earlier than we intended to, so the Squirrel's Research page is just a really simple landing page right now. There's a full site there that is not launched. But if you hit the survey link, you give us the information on what you're interested in, that helps us in planning. It's not because I want to know all your secrets, it's because it literally helps us plan to make sure that we can have the parts that you want ready. And then you'll get the email when we open up on the pre-sale.
Okay, awesome. I think this is probably one of the last big questions, and that is with regards to platform optimization. Is there any kind of an advantage to using Acorn with AMD over NVIDIA or vice versa?
The AMD boards that we're testing tend to have more PCIe lanes going to slots. That's nebulous. There is no direct advantage, although there is an advantage if you want to just use an Acorn with a Threadripper. That's a very valid use case. Okay,
so wow, interesting.
Nobody thought about that yet, right?
Well, no. Well, truth be told, I wanted to do a Threadripper build for my Walton Chain miner, but it was going to be a Walton Chain / workstation miner. So yep. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to revisit this. And I mean, I don't know, community. Do you think maybe if I ask nicely and I promise to give it back, do you think it'd be appropriate for me to ask for a review sample of an Acorn when it comes time? Tell me down in the comments. I don't want to be untoward or in any way.
To be completely realistic and transparent about this, there are going to be a small quantity of Acorns that are done off of the final production ramp test line that I want to distribute to developers and reviewers, but more developers.
Let's just be honest. They're going to do better things with it than we will.
Because it's the same thing here, right? I'm not trying to own this entire ecosystem. I want to make this hardware available, and I want it to do great things. And we have great developers here. We might have some resources here, but that's always going to pale to what's available out in the community. So,
okay, awesome. Yeah, I would love to see that. I'd love to see that applied to Threadripper because, for my part, I'm with you. I think useful work it really matters. We need to get more of this hardware doing what it was uniquely suited to do. So, if products like the Acorn can help to accelerate mining, the use case that we chatted about before the live stream, I think that was kind of the original intent of the Acorn, right? Was to help. So turn, what is it? Sort of turn the plowshare into a sword and then back again.
A little bit of flexibility goes a long way.
Okay, awesome.
And I think, I will say, because I know that question is going to come up, we're really looking into what we can do with Acorns in minority, in addition to the 1525 work. So
nice. And so no announcement there yet in terms of any kind of official alignment with minority.
That's largely up to minority, but we're 100% open to it.
Very, very cool. Okay, you guys heard it here first. Make some noise down in the comments if you want to see more announcements on minority and any adoption of Acorn as a total platform accelerator or as a card accelerator there, because that could take shape in a lot of ways. All right, awesome. So I also
shout out, I got to get this in here. I also should shout out to Tom at Allmine, who's been part of the BCU 1525 group buy and originated as a group buy. We stepped in and helped a lot with the logistics, but he really did do a lot of work to get this set up and has done a lot of work to manage all of the buys and the people and the questions. So he's pretty overloaded. Be patient with him, everybody, but I wanted to at least thank him for all that work too.
Yeah, awesome. So I got a couple remaining questions in the comments, and guys, I think they've been answered. So, but let me pose them to you one more time. Yeah, actually, I think I've got other commenters answering those questions. I don't want to take any more of your time than would be appropriate.
This is a fantastic community. There's a fantastic group of people that have really engaged themselves to getting this information and sharing it and helping keeping the wheels on the cart, so to speak. Make sure that everybody knows what they need to know. That's why I'm really happy to be part of it. So. Yeah,
awesome, David. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Can we bring you back on the show to talk either to a coin project or to another hardware project? Would you like being on a panel?
I would be happy to consider that. We'll figure out where we can schedule it in.
Right.
By delay any acorns, though, we might have mutiny.
Right. Well, we appreciate all the hard work in the lab. Appreciate you taking the time out to do this. Won't bother you unnecessarily, but if it can be scheduled, we'd love to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
I think it's something we can do. So,
all right, guys. Thanks. I'm gonna say goodbye on the live stream there. Thanks. See you next time. Ooh. Wow. Wow. So, hey guys, before I let you go, if you're still on the live stream, remember, you're the reason I make these interviews. You're the reason I go through the trouble of setting these things up. Love your face. If you haven't hit subscribe and the bell icon, do so now so you're notified when new videos come out. I'll see you next time.